the saddest thing about this is this isn't the worst book we could have covered for tonight. Hey there, everyone, and welcome to a lore ramblings, although it's also more of a Dice Scum live. I'm Adam, and yes, I'm a little bit frazzled because I thought this IP was dead. I mean, it is, but I didn't think we'd cover this one.
And I'm Insit, and what we'll be covering today is A Fearful Lesson from the Dark Ages Companion for Chronicles of Darkness. This is the one about uh, beasts in Reconstruction era South. Oh boy.
The best part is they actually get the date of the Reconstruction period wrong, since the years they list are for the Civil War's back half. That's the best part.
Well, they give a reason for why, but at the same time, why do this?
uh, why do this indeed? Jesus fucking Christ. Well, there's no avoiding it. Let's open it up and. A Fearful Lesson from 1863 to 1865. We're going to ignore the short story because the less we read about Beast, the better. The quote here: I wish there was some law here, or some protection. I wish I had protection from this splat. I know the Southerners pretty well. Having been in the service so long as a detective, I still find myself scrutinizing them closely. There is that sinister expression about the eye, and the quiet but bitterly expressed feeling that I know portends evil. Freed woman and Union spy.
Actual person, apparently.
Yeah, yeah. This is gonna be one of the. This is the most White Wolf that Onyx Path ever got. I think,
And not in the good way.
in the tasteless way.
We're not going for uh, a Showa book. We're going for a Berlin by Night.
No, this is more like the time they
Um,
had Chechnya.
Oh.
You know, the thing that actually had them fire a lot of the old alumni from White Wolf. That that one. That moment. So, the Reconstruction South is a post-apocalyptic society. No wildly dressed outback cowboys race across the desert. They do if you actually go to the Western Territories, my guy. But that's not where we are. No one battles for oil. Well, yeah, it's not important at this point. No hordes of undead threaten lucky survivors. Are they just trying to talk about Deadlands? Is this all Deadlands references?
No, I think it's a post-apocalyptic reference.
Oh. However, not only must the South cope with the fallout of war, their defeat radically upended the Southern way of life. The social and economic institutions upon which the pre-war South relied on vanished into the wind, gone with the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Survivors must now navigate a society whose rules change day by day. Bandits, vagabonds, and corrupt leaders seem determined to steal what little the region has left. The only law and order comes imposed by a people so far removed from Southern culture, they might as well be foreigners. Scratch the veneer of Southern gentility and watch centuries of oppression pour out. Yeah, it's gonna be one of these ones. This is gonna be great. I'm
I
already
mean,
I'm already gonna vomit in my mouth.
you're talking about Reconstruction South.
It
It's
fits,
kind of
but when
apt
you throw in beasts, it just makes it so much worse.
because if people don't remember beasts, the entire concept is that you horrify, terrify, and perhaps even torture people to teach them a lesson.
We're the victims, though. We are the victims. Sympathize with me as I torment this child into having PTSD for the rest of their life. Feel sorry for me when a person rightfully tries to put my awful ass down into the dirt for a nap. Ugh.
So
It
I
doesn't
do
help
think
that the Beast book is. I have shat on the Deviant, the Renegade book, just because it's not very well designed, and I don't like that they use the Wraith Shadow mechanics. I'm not a fan of that. But you know what I can say about it? It's still less. It's still more interesting than Beast. Beast was so repetitive in its design. So the
so.
introduction, the civil. This is talking
This
about
is
the
Civil
outline of the
War.
Civil War. Yeah.
Yeah, it left a psychological anguish on the primordial dream. Um, People are coming in from the north to start up. you know, to start up the society that has been completely destroyed because of the war.
Well, it's
Uh,
more along the lines of, so just for a very quick outline, because this is some very basic stuff. So after the South tried to secede because they didn't like the results of the president that got elected, as well as a few other things, owning property that can think for itself and talk. Yeah, they got their shit pushed in. It took 4 years and a lot of bodies because that's how civil wars work, but they got absolutely fucking bodied. And because of that, a lot of the government officials, guess what, couldn't run for office. They couldn't manage anything. Why? I don't know, maybe something about rebelling against the actual government that got elected? So you had no one on staff. So what happened was, especially after Lincoln got assassinated, you essentially had Republican Congress set up military districts to try to get people back under lock and key. Essentially, they had to send people down there because the actual experts were too busy, not allowed to do anything. So that's where the term the carpetbagger term came from. This flood of Northerners who essentially had to fill in the roles of, well, what Southerners used to do.
and well, the Southerners resent that.
How
And these,
dare how dare you do the job I used to do after I tried to rebel against the central fucking government and failed?
and also it turns out a whole bunch of the population is now treated as equals, somewhat. So the reaction is to start committing acts of terrorism.
Yep. If you're wondering, the Ku Klux Klan wasn't the only organization that was founded during this time. In fact, every southern state tended to have their own hate group or terrorist organization. There were the Red Shirts, which were a very common group up until the end of Reconstruction. There were the Knights of the Camellia, which were a South Carolinian group, and there were a few dozen others. All of them basically saying, "Fuck you, fuck you, you can't tell us what to do. Don't give these insert racial slur here any freedom." And that's where beasts come in.
Because now you have to teach people, those people, not, and when I mean those people, I mean everyone involved, a lesson. What's that? Could it be that a beast that travels home be dismayed that Confederate traders been allowed to return home, uh, balking that former slave owners keep much of their power? Maybe it's the northern carpetbaggers, parasites who feed greedily off southern pain. Or perhaps it's against the freed black slaves. Which
So,
brings up the reason why the fuck would you play this? Because there's essentially a way to legitimately play as supernatural Ku Klux Klan tormenting recently freed slaves.
yeah. So, there's a reason that this book is, this splat is not a good idea. Because on the one hand, you have the ones where you go against the former slave owners and the KKK. That's actually the first example they list because they know that's something that could at least be seen as interesting and make your beast characters not horrible fucking monsters, even though they are, because they're just justifying it against reprehensible people. But this book also, by extent, has you able to terrorize not just poor freedmen, but also don't forget the very poor Southerners who legitimately just got back from the war, maybe missing a limb because they got it amputated from sepsis after a battle. You know, a little bit of post-traumatic stress. They signed up to defend their state at the age of 15, came back a broken shell at 9. Yeah, you could just torment that motherfucker until he just says, you know what, screw it. I am done with life, and they vanish to never be seen
Or
again.
or again, be the spirit that torments the black guy that's running for local office. Because how dare he not be in his proper station?
Or you could do the other standard KKK protocol, which is where you go after Catholics, like the Irish, because you specifically hated that they didn't support the Civil War enough. To the point where if you're wondering where St. Patrick's Day came about, it's actually because of the Civil War. Irish Americans were not happy about being impressed into the war, into something that they didn't feel was worth their time since they just got off the boat because of the blight.
I will go to here. Supernatural KKK is a shit post. Fun. That's actually, you know what'd be fun? You play as it, and you're haunting the KKK. That way, then when they take the hood off, they realize there's nothing underneath it.
Oh no, I thought you were gonna go with the idea that your beast was you're doing the Dave Chappelle skit where the beast is actually is actually a freed slave or a slave that disguised themselves and led a chapter just so that they could then sabotage it from within and get them all arrested and killed for treason.
Because the lesson was blacks can equally be as offensive as whites.
So, sticks and stones, stay mindful of your language because you know what? During this
Yeah,
time period, you know what you could say and not get in trouble.
words worse than what's not allowed to be said here.
Yeah, we don't have Biggie here. He'd give us the pass. I don't think he would. Actually, he shouldn't. But either way,
Uh, so what has come before?
the
Well,
lesson of
you
war.
see,
Oh, okay. Come before.
well, I think we've kind of gone over that.
Fair enough.
Um, there's a part about the lost cause, but I think we can delve into that later.
We'll delve into that later because we kind of have to. Jubal Early has done almost as much damage to the United States as Woodrow Wilson has. I
So,
hate Jubal Early. He is a big piece of shit. So this is an outline of the Civil War because let's be fair, not everyone actually remembers the major events in it. I
well,
will.
more knows about it. We do have an international audience.
Mhm. I will
So you
say though
see,
that every battle that they're going to list usually has a southern equivalent name because they mentioned the first battle of Bull Run. In the South, that'd be known as First Manassas.
so 1861, the prop, I guess you could call it the original sin of the United States. It comes home to roost. The thing that we have been delaying almost every 20 years or so, which is the issue of slavery, it finally results into a civil war.
Okay,
All
so
because all
some
because a president gets elected that the South took off the ballot
and
and
still
feared
lost.
was going to end slavery, even though that was not in his platform.
So let me, since I actually, this is kind of one of my specialities. So the problem with slavery was something that even the founding fathers recognized. You had Thomas Jefferson actually try to argue to, on some degree, on freeing slaves, even though he was a hypocrite and owned them himself. George Washington himself was at least somewhat sympathetic. But the biggest problem was that they decided, for sake of unity, they could at the very least kick it down the road. Because at the time period, the 1770s, 1780s, slavery was actually starting to decline in the United States. I'm not even
I mean,
kidding. It's
well
just, it wasn't profitable.
they were able to get within the Constitution that slave importation is going to be banned, like 1803 or was it 1807? And it
1807, I
did.
think.
It got so the importation was banned early on, but the
So,
issue
well, let
of
me, because this
yeah.
is kind of my wheelhouse. So the big problem that absolutely scuppered the plan was the invention of the cotton gin. See, slavery was most efficient when it didn't cost a lot, and cotton being a very expensive crop is very time intensive to harvest. Slavery has, and it also is hard on the soil. Slavery was not very profitable just because of the amount of output you had to, the effort you had to do to get output. The cotton gin made that real easy and made slavery a lot more lucrative. So what happened instead was it became more popular, it became more useful, especially to the South, whose main exports, unlike the North, since it never got as much development, mainly due to climate. It had a more favorable agricultural climate. It basically brought slavery back with a vengeance. So what eventually happens is the U.S. begins to expand territories, and at first it's not a big deal until 1820, where Missouri was ready to become a state. Missouri wanted to be a slave state. This wasn't good because that would mean the slave states would have had more senators than the free states. So eventually they came up with the 1820 Compromise, where they split off territory from Massachusetts. Funnily enough, the North Territory of Massachusetts became Maine. That way, you could enter one free and one slave state. Kick the can down the road. Same thing happened in the 1840s. Essentially, after kicking Mexico's ass, the same problem occurred. Where are the slave states? Which eventually came up with I think it was the 1850 Compromise, where below a certain parallel, you couldn't have slavery.
Ma- That I believe that's where we get the term the Mason-Dixon line.
Somewhat. That's it. That's its own thing. That's also its own thing. Then what happened was Bleeding Kansas. Since Kansas, essentially, there was a court ruling that essentially changed up how this worked, if I recall correctly. I'm a little bit fuzzy on the details.
So
Uh,
I'm looking. So looking here. So Kansas. The question it would when it would become a state. The question was, is it going to be a slave or a free state?
and
Um,
eventually, what happened was the court's ruling was let them figure it out, which led
it's
to,
decided by popular sovereignty within the state.
which sounds
Um,
like a good idea in principle, right? Right?
it led to hundreds of people dying.
Because what would happen is southern colonists would try to establish a bigger population base, setting up towns and stuff, and then the North would do the same thing, and the radicals from both would begin picking fights. This is actually where John Brown got his first career taste as an activist, abolitionist, and terrorist. He was a major figure in Bleeding Kansas.
Th- There,
Eventually, though, what happened was 1860, since at this point, politically, the Democratic Party is the oldest party in the United States. It outlasted the Federalist Party, which fell apart after Hamilton and Washington. It outlasted the Whigs, which outsplit from the original Democratic Republican Party. And at this point, a new party was coming around called the Republicans. And its early beliefs included anti-Mormonism, which is very funny. That's actually why Mormons got rid of their polygamy. I'm not even kidding. Anti-slavery. They were very firmly anti-slavery, and they were pro smaller businessmen. Basically, it was the interest of smaller businessmen, capitalists, North workers, a bunch of things, because these were big tent parties. Then came 1860. It was a four-way race. You had, for the Republicans, a young lawyer, a young failed lawyer. He didn't have many accomplishments, named Abraham Lincoln. For the Democratic Party, it split in two. You had Stephen Douglas for the northern wing of the party, and then you had John C. Breckinridge for the southern Democratic Party. And then you had a compromise candidate in the form of John Bell from the Union Constitutional Party or whatever it was. Because of the vote splitting, this allowed Abraham Lincoln to win the electoral votes without winning a single southern county. This was and this was actually this had a lot to do with just population distribution. The North had a lot more opportunities for careers because it was more developed. It had larger factories, the cities were larger, infrastructure was better. You could find jobs more easily.
it didn't rely on slave labor.
Yeah. And ultimately what happened was the South panicked. They had no they had none of their counties voting for this man. And this was a party that literally 4 years ago said we're getting rid of slavery. So what happened was these rich plantation owners, as well as poor Southerners who just didn't like Lincoln, as well, they were terrified of their slaves. The Southerners were terrified that this guy from the North could just dictate what they wanted. So they began picking fights and getting generals. A lot of generals were from the South at this point, and a lot of military units were also from the South as well. They began hijacking Union armories, and this also happened due to what was it? John Brown's corpse, the incident where he gets killed, the Harper's Ferry incident. But ultimately, what happens is the final straw is an attack on Fort Sumter. It wasn't the only fort that got attacked. It was just like the
They,
final straw.
I believe it was they had already declared the South had already declared
Several
secession.
states already declared themselves independent, and at several points, a couple of forts were already raided. This was the first time the garrison fought back.
And now we're at the crossroads of do what does the Union do? Do we go to war with ourselves? Do we let them go? What do we do? And
Lincoln
the
committed
result,
to
mm,
a House divided cannot stand. He decided to prosecute the war. The South agreed, and ultimately what happened was a 4 long years of bloodshed. It could have
resulting that
potentially ended
mm,
quickly at the Battle of First Manassas, aka Bull Run. It didn't. The Union did not expect the South to be able to beat them because it was kind of an impromptu thing, but also the better generals and the more experienced soldiers joined the South. Then it became a grinding mess. In short, you could divide the Civil War into basically two major theaters. You had the East Theater and the West Theater. West Theater was much more favorable to the Union, just because, again, population distribution. They also had somewhat better generals. Ulysses S. Grant was a general in the West before he got transplanted. The East, you had some of the worst commanders, like George C. McClellan, a guy who defeated Robert E. Lee in basically 7 battles in 7 days. This is the Battle of 7 Days. And despite whooping his ass in almost every one, ran away because he was just such a cautious idiot. He overplanned a peninsular campaign that could have actually cut off and destroyed Richmond. Fucked that up. The motherfucker had Robert E. Lee's plans for Antietam. This is one of the funniest things. Robert E. Lee basically had his plans. He set up his plans with his boys Stonewall Jackson and Longstreet on how to whoop the North's army's ass. He drops it, like one of his messenger guys drop it in a cigar box. An enterprising Union boy manages to find it, thinking, hey, free smokes. Finds battle plans, hands them to McClellan, and the guy barely won. That's how fucking terrible this man is. Then after him was Hooker, who wasn't much better, until eventually Lincoln was just going, can I find someone that can actually fight? I don't need pussies. I need people who can fucking go through. And the reason Grant was a good general was he basically went, yes, this will kill a lot of soldiers, but I also will win. He realized we're going to have to do this total war style. Casualties are not good, but we can go through them. The South can't.
which is exactly as true. Uh, you had people, I believe, from the South dodging the draft in a way, sort of, especially if they were rich.
Quite a few. You
Um,
would send poor men. This also
yeah,
happened in the North, by the way, because it was a very common method.
and they
You
sent
also
poor,
in
they
the
sent
North
immigrants.
You also had in the North what are called political appointees. A lot of the generals were politically appointed because they were friends or they were able to build up militia units.
As Squawker was pointing out, another thing was logistics and industry.
Yes, because the North just genuinely, I think, had something like 3 times the industry that the South did, or yeah, it's like 3 or 4 times. In
And
terms of
what
logistics,
little
they had a lot more railroads. What
Yeah.
the South had were rivers. If you're wondering, they didn't invest as much in railroads simply just because you have the Mississippi River. You have a
hmm
lot of river systems. You can just use ferries. That's why the
Then
North
we
built
decide,
such a huge army, such a huge navy of ironclads, and why they
yep,
did blockades.
and also burning down what remained of the industry.
Oh yeah, that is
Sherman burned down 300 miles from Savannah, Georgia to the sea, and
yeah. I mean,
also,
that's what
yeah,
Sherman realized.
yeah. Also, I guess you're right. The South only lasts as long as it did due to Northern incompetence.
I'm not kidding. It is entirely possible if First Bull Run was a Union victory, the South might have crumbled. I don't think it would have instantly clapped. I think what would happen instead would have been that they might have retreated. If it would have ended though by 1862 though.
But while this has been going on, well, in 1863, uh, Abraham Lincoln announces the Emancipation Proclamation,
By the way, this
declaring
is a very cynical. This is actually a more cynical. It's a very lovely
it's
document.
in it.
It's something we really needed. We did
It has
genuinely
no
need
power
this.
though. It's not like the
Oh
people
no,
who
no, that's not the
yeah.
point. In the document itself, he proclaims any slave that was in rebel controlled territory is treated as free and a citizen of the United States. The entire point was to completely sabotage their resources and get basically a fifth column. I forget if the North or the South were the first to try to use freedmen as troops.
I don't think the South ever used.
They
It
did.
doesn't even like
They did in desperation in 1864 and 5 they did. They
they
were
treat
treated
them
like
as
shit.
well.
Essentially they were promised freedom if they fought, yeah. They were not very
I'm not-
reliable though, and they were not trusted.
yeah. Um.
I
I
do know that I do know
there
that
there. It was
what
like wasn't the Massachusetts 54th?
they were.
I think was an all black regiment.
I also know that Nathan Bedford Forrest, who eventually founded the KKK, also was at least partially responsible for a massacre of an all-black regiment. Because when they were captured, they were basically put down as like revolting slaves.
So yeah. So this is where we start for this
There's a reason
companion.
why the U.S. Civil War has the highest body count in all of the U.S. wars ever.
Wasn't it 600,000?
Yeah, that's more than World War II and Vietnam.
So we're at the end of the Civil War, and we have to know, what do we do? We essentially have an occupied territory that is full of peop hostiles. You know,
Potential hostiles. You also have no administration whatsoever. And that's not entirely true. There were always Union sympathizers in the South. It just depended on the region. There were entire parts, even in Alabama, that legitimately did guerrilla campaigns against the CSA.
hmm,
Although conversely, there were what were called Copperheads, which were Southern sympathizers in the North, particularly in Missouri and the great state of Delaware, which voted for fucking Breckinridge because Delaware at that time was like Alabama.
wait, fucking Delaware?
Yeah, it had a similar cultural climate. Like once you got past Newcastle, it just turned to Alabama. Once you cross the D&C Canal, it goes from Philadelphia to Alabama real fucking quick at that time
Uh,
period.
I mean, apologies to anyone from Delaware, but it's one of those states that you just don't remember.
Here's another fun fact. Delaware came closest to actually being the first state to emancipate its slaves. Every time it failed by one vote.
Well,
Just one.
well, actually, a fun
It's
fact I
because they
remember.
only had about 1,000 slaves.
Yeah,
Slavery wasn't very profitable in the state.
Georgia at one point before independence, so in like the early 1700s, had a period where they ended slavery.
Oh no,
It
it was
did.
originally a colony that wasn't supposed to have any slaves because it was supposed to be a debtor's colony, and one that was supposed to be like an attempt to make a more moral and upstanding society. Not even kidding. It started with completely noble intentions, and then they went, "Holy shit, tobacco and fucking cotton are very valuable. Give me my
So,
slaves."
yeah. So the
It's
radical
similar to how
republic.
Maryland actually started as a Catholic refuge.
Ah,
Yep,
so
it was supposed
the
to be a Catholic refuge, much like how Pennsylvania started as a Quaker refuge.
so onto the narrative. The radical Republicans submit this Wade Davis bill, which would have required provisional governors for the South, a majority of the white males to pledge allegiance to the Union, and a passage of certain laws, including the abolition of slavery and the disenfranchisement of former Confederates.
Basically, this
Lincoln,
was their method of trying to reintegrate the states by essentially beating loyalty into them.
I do. I have a feeling if we did go full force on that, it would have worked. But at the same time, it
It would have led
again,
to riots and rebellions.
right. Same thing as in the Civil War. It would have a lot of casualties. And
There would have been a second civil war.
yeah, so Lincoln pocket vetoes it, which means he just doesn't sign it or vetoes it. Um,
Essentially, what Lincoln originally wanted was, I think he wanted to have between 1 to 5% of all of them to reproclaim their loyalty, and I think they came around to something like 10% on the final compromise.
the other compromise is approving the 13th Amendment, the one that abolishes slavery.
Yeah, that one
Then
that
he
one
gets
was rather
shot.
quick.
Then John Wilkes Booth shoots him in the face.
To give you an idea, this would be like the equivalent of Pedro Pascal just walking up to President Joe Biden and just blamming him.
Well,
John
during
Wilkes
what?
Booth was essentially the
Yeah.
star of that time period. Like if this was 30 years ago, it'd be like if Brad Pitt walked in and shot Clinton.
I mean, the good news about him though is that when he was caught, he was caught in, I believe, a barn and burned alive.
Yeah, his legs were broken because of a bad fall. He was trying to escape, and they just torched him.
So Andrew Johnson takes over, and Johnson,
Johnson is one of the
interesting.
worst presidents we've
Uh,
had.
a story I know of. He got drunk during the inaugural address of 1865. So this is when he would have been vice president. He drank so heavily. Um, he kissed the Bible when he took the oath of office. Was too drunk to administer the oath of office to the incoming senators. And 42 days later, he would become the president of the United States.
If you're
He is
the
also the first president that went through impeachment
He was. Also, some other fun facts about Andrew Johnson. Do you want to know why he was even vice president?
because he was more of a he was a Southern Democrat. Was he a Southern Democrat? He was a
He was
Democrat, I
the
believe.
governor of Tennessee, and he actually refused his own state's call for separation. He was one of the only politicians from any of the South that sided with the Union. And Lincoln wanted to prove that this was a unity government. That's why he picked him. And if you're wondering, Tennessee actually it was much like Kentucky in that there were strong Union presences in both. It's just the state legislative and the executives, well, sided with the South at least somewhat.
Yeah.
Except
And
Johnson. Johnson legitimately just refused to acknowledge it.
and this kind of starts the trend of it just sort of I guess apathy or just we want things to
He,
return back to normal.
no,
Okay,
he
we
just
fought.
wanted it to resolve because
Yeah.
he was like, oh, come on, fucking man.
We're
He
just
was a Southern
we're
Democrat. Do you think he
yeah.
would give a shit about this stuff?
I will be I don't think the majority of Americans at the time cared about it.
They didn't. They just wanted to go back to their life,
They 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 wanted to go back.
which is awful,
They
but
they,
I mean, think
they
about it.
yeah, but the after effects of that though is you can
There's
trace
a
a lot of
reason
problems
why
today.
the civil rights movement needed to be a thing, and it took another 100 years.
So
Seriously, if
so with
Reconstruction was
yeah.
done correctly, we probably would have had most of the worst of the issues finished by the 20th century, at least
But I
somewhat.
think to understand a little bit of the resistance to the challenge to that, going into the social forces at play. So there is a very heavy gender politics.
Well, no shit. It's the 19th century. This
Yeah,
this is
you had
during
that.
this is the Victorian age where Queen Victoria is like, well, the job of a woman is to find a man. You know, the Queen of the United Kingdom, the empire that never set. You gotta find a man. Like, what do you expect in that time period? You know,
Well, the thing with the South though that's a bit different. The South has a lot, I would say, more of an influence from the French, especially going from Louisiana and um, I guess the influence from there. Um, there's this
there's
concept.
some of that, and just genuinely, like this is frontier life. You kind of need. It was
Yeah,
frontier life too. That's kind of another effect of that.
women were to possess four virtues: piety, purity, domesticity, and submissiveness. So religious, Protestant, sexually pure.
If you're
So
wondering
just
where
devoted.
that comes from, it's funny because in the New England region, it was founded by radical Puritans who were hardcore Protestants, reformed faith. In the South, it's actually because of this is something they should have mentioned. It's due to the Great Awakening. Basically, the U.S. went through three great religious revivals. This is the product of, I believe, the first, and I think there was the second Great Awakening too. at the same time. Yeah, there was the First Great
No, the second
Awakening.
second Great Awakening is in like the 1870s. That's where we get, Kellogg and
No, I
the
thought there was
Prohibition
one in
movement.
the 1840s because that's where the Seventh Day Adventists and Mormons come from.
I think we grouped that together, if I remember from my American history.
Because there's the First Great Awakening, which led to uh, big moves among the Episcopalian movements. That's where Methodism comes from. Then there's the Second Great Awakening, which is where you get your Seventh Day Adventists, Mormons. Basically, it's a big bout of spiritualism. Then you have the Third Great Awakening, which is what you're talking about.
Okay, I'm thinking third Great Awakening might be something like what we had in the 80s, 1980s with
That could be the Fourth Great Awakening for
televangelism.
all we know.
Yeah. Um,
Basically, if you want religious insanity in Christianity, you can blame the U.S. This is what happens when you send your demented and criminals to the fucking place. Don't know why Australia isn't more messed up, but hey, what can you do?
I mean, it's Australia. It's as messed up as it's going to be. Uh, so we have then the concept of the cult of domesticity that essentially uh, the woman's affairs are only within the home and child rearing, but at the same time being submissive also to the demands of the husband. So, woman's place is be Protestant, be devout and submissive to your husband, and do all the work at home. If you fall out of that, you are clearly a loose woman, um, probably devious, lacking in any good qualities for a husband.
Jesus Christ,
Uh,
they put way too much thought into this section. Yeah, it makes sense, but like compare this to other splats we've covered in Dark Eras, which mentions roles,
yeah.
gender roles. What the fuck is this?
Well, then they go up with
Don't get me
the.
wrong. This is stuff
Well,
that you do need to know, but
we'll do
really?
remember who made this, who made Beast.
We haven't even gotten to the misgeniation or however you pronounce it.
But do remember who made Beast and why he made it.
We didn't even get to the part where we get.
This may this may be apologizing and trying to make up for the fact it was essentially a rape apology game.
Look, I'm just saying we haven't even gotten to the part where what happens when a white woman chooses to go with a black man, because that
Oh,
that was something that
that's presumed
happened.
to be rape. That is presumed to be rape, or well, by force, as it says. Um, essentially, summarize the women's place is in the home and do whatever your husband says.
I also like how they had to slip in Pocahontas in here, just
Yeah, I
to.
don't know why. Yeah, like
There's no reason other than maybe this, since this was like as he was getting accused and kicked off, maybe he, like managed to get this line inserted in. Like, if you're gonna get me for sexual predation, I'm gonna put this in here. I don't know.
yeah. Then next is the economy. So materialism was growing, um, but we also had this issue of central banking.
So before we get
The,
in,
the
Not Nito has a great question. This is some neat history, but why is this relevant to the game?
I
Um,
don't know.
it's only slightly relevant. I think honestly, you could just
Well,
cut about like 2/3 of this, and it would be fine.
like yeah, like the only thing I
You
think
should
relevant.
you should
Re-
definitely say women were expected to be the domestic, so women beasts who are more active are going to be seen as loose women, and then you have to point out the white woman and black man thing.
yeah.
You kind of
the,
have to. In this setting, you
the
kind of
yeah,
have to.
I guess the only line here is the impact of I guess Jackson's attempt to murder. No, he did murder the
He
bank.
actually
He
did
did.
kill the first national bank, yes.
Yep. Is that
Although to be
real
fair, it
wages?
was not well run.
Yeah, real wages were dropped, and the impact of the recession could be felt even through the
I'm
Reconstruction.
going to be blunt. This entire section is also dog shit.
It does, yeah.
There is no reason to bring up the collapse of the first American bank. Do you want to know what you should focus on? You should focus on this is during the time of the gold standard, where because of how gold fluctuates in value, it isn't uncommon for economic crises to occur. Because this is less than 10 years before the crisis of 1873. There was
but
basically every 10 to 20 years there was an economic collapse and crisis just because of gold
yeah,
rates changing.
here we get something that's relevant. The law and people of color. Um,
Which is interesting because that's one of the older terms for color, because colored folk is one of the first iterations of that. I just think it's interesting that it's circled back. It's like a ring.
yeah,
It's weird.
blame changing social cultural standards.
I think it's just the
Given
desire to
given
do
a
to
hundred
pretend to change
given a
something.
hundred years, everything we'll say now will sound weird.
So given
But
50 years, you get the N-word passed back because that's what they want to call themselves.
oh, I don't know. But they
We don't
bring up
know. Maybe.
um they bring up uh Denmark Vesey, who in 1822 attempted to bought his own freedom, attempted to have a uh, set up a church for the black community, but other political elites shut him down. Um,
I understand bringing up early efforts to fight slavery, but what does this
yeah,
have to do
they bring
with
up Nat
Reconstruction?
Turner.
What does this have to do with Reconstruction?
It does. It has more to do with how the South will uh, view slave freedom, which is essentially, oh my God, this is what happened to Haiti. We don't want that happening again.
But does it need to be a long history lesson of failed slave revolts and activist measures to free them?
No, no, not
What
really.
what is this nonsense? Look, I understand. I love learning and talking about American history. This is my wheelhouse. But here's the thing. This is more to explain the psyche of why the Civil War happened more than anything else. You shouldn't be talking about this shit. You know what you should be talking about? You should be talking about the acts of terror that were enacted during the Reconstruction period by the Klan and by the Knights of the Camellia and Red Shirts. You should talk about the literacy laws that the South passed as soon as they gained the ability to make their own laws again. By the way, if you're wondering, that this is really fun. Uh, the literacy of black people in the by the 1890s was like at an 80% in the South, at least in terms of functional literacy, where they're able to read at like a third grade level or a fifth grade level or whatever they needed. Do you want to know why? That way they didn't get turned away at the polls. If you're wondering what the average education level of white people were in the South at that point, it was something like 26% were literate. 26, 28%, a little better than Russia. Because, hey, they didn't need to do those laws. They were just kind of let in. Technically, they could get stopped by it, but you know
But
what those laws were for.
yeah,
Case in point, you're not talking about that. You're not talking about poll tax, where you had to pay money to vote. That was also
yeah.
a measure that was passed so that if you
The
were
whole
black or poor, you
timeline
couldn't
here is
vote.
using they should have gone for this honestly 1865, 1877.
Why aren't they talking about the lynchings that occurred? Why are they not
They are
talking
coming
about
up
riots?
when they talk about what is to come.
That's not what is the
Uh,
that's Reconstruction era beast. What is this shit?
yeah, this is s- so. What is to come is Andrew Johnson assumes the presidency. Um, there's a complex just legislative thing between the Republican-dominated Congress and Johnson, who's more South-friendly.
No,
Congress would
he was a Democrat. He
yeah.
legitimately was a Democrat. What the No, he was a Democrat.
Was he on like? I mean,
I think he might have changed his party specifically just so he could be cross ticket, but he was a Democrat.
hmm. So what
This
would
is
happen
stupid.
though
Also,
is
if you're as
Congress.
you're wondering,
Yeah,
the impeachment was specifically just because he kept vetoing laws. He had one of the highest veto rates of any president.
yeah. And then he fires his Secretary of War, and that gives Congress the excuse to impeach the president.
By the way, do you want to know how close he came to actually the impeachment passing through? One
How much?
guy legitimately voted nay. He was the tiebreaker, and he voted nay specifically because, in his own words, if we do this now, this could be potentially weaponized by presidents even more evil than him.
Oh,
He legitimately said this is a final resort, and I don't think he's quite reached treason yet. If we do impeach him, we open the gates for more people to abuse this system.
oh no, clearly it
He
wouldn't be
legitimately
abused.
didn't like him. He just said we
Yeah.
shouldn't use it.
First of all, we need. That's the kind of caliber of politician that
Yeah, we don't got. I mean,
is
think
needed.
about. No, no, no. Here's the
At the
problem, though. This is also the
yeah.
same time period where you could beat the shit out of your compatriot. If you're wondering why
Oh,
the name Fort Sumter was named, it was specifically after a Massachusetts senator who shat talk and basically dunked all over a Southern senator, who then beat
beat
him
him
to
with a.
near death with a cane.
And then you know what people did in response? Sent him more canes. They mailed him more canes.
Like
But
Congress at this time was not noble. This is the place where you had a crazy
look,
drunk man
when
going,
was it
"We,
ever?
we need
When
to,
was it ever noble? We
we
don't
need."
have parliamentary rules.
Parliament's
We've
actually more
never been
riotous.
noble.
I know.
Yeah, we're not surprisingly without the parliamentary rules, we have not gone into a full-scale riot or have had people bring in guns and actually fired them. We have had people, I think, bring in guns, but we haven't had them fire them in the air. Um, we've only had one guy get beaten. We've only had one president get shot in a duel. You
Like,
know, it,
don't elevate politicians. We're the country that elected two legitimate that had two schizophrenic people on our Supreme Court. Not at the same time, thankfully, but you know, we had a senator who was like, "Hey, can you put the biggest gun on a battleship?" Oh, you mean like a 16 inch? No, 21 inches. What? Bigger battleship. That way we
have
don't
you?
have to bother building more of them.
I forget the name of the representative. There is a representative that is on the record questioning if we add more stuff to the island of Guam, will it tip over?
He did.
I
He
believe,
thought islands could flip like could
he is
flip.
still, I believe, in office.
He is. He's still
Uh,
in office.
uh,
There was actually a guy who legitimately was. I think this was during one of the early. It was either during the monkey trials or there was like another one in the 2000s where intelligent design was being pushed again. He said something along the lines of, would this new book allow us to save children from Satan or whatever?"
is that Strom Thurmond?
I don't know. I just know that you get some really stupid comments from congressmen. It's amazing.
Then again, representatives of America. What better than crazy people?
You know what we need? We need more crackheads. We need to emulate Canada and elect a crackhead somewhere. Not someone who gets outed for like just who is open about taking crack.
Squirrel God's favorite sitcom. Yes.
Yeah,
Uh, but next up, though, after Johnson, is Grant,
corruption.
who you would think, oh, he's a war hero, he would hold things up. Nope, complete corruption.
Well, in
Was he
fairness, he himself wasn't corrupt. He just was an awful judge of character.
was he Teapot Dome? No, that was
No,
Harding.
that was Harding.
What was his scandal?
He had a bunch of them actually. He's responsible for things like he basically just elected his cronies, like people he liked, into his offices. Like his cabinet was made up of his
Yeah.
friends or people who told him good ideas. The guy was basically gullible when it came to politics. He wasn't personally corrupt. He never was a part of the cut, so to speak. But the people he selected to be in his cabinet, they were.
And I will say this, the corruption gets so bad, one of our presidents will be killed because he didn't give a guy a job at the post office.
Yep.
Garfield will be killed by a man who is upset that he was not given a job at the post
He
office.
got shot. He was either shot or died on a Monday too. That's why the cat hates it.
The good thing about that, though, is his vice president was very much anti-corruption. But
Well, both of them were.
yeah, I guess
Garfield also
yeah,
was.
well, didn't have much of a time to implement it.
Best part is he didn't actually die from from the assassination attempt. He died from the botched surgery.
Yeah. So on top of all this corruption, that means when they're trying to actually implement infrastructure like railroads, telegraph lines, factories in the Confederacy, embezzled, fraud.
This is why
So,
carpetbaggers were so hated, is because a lot of them were. It's not the Lincoln ones, and it wasn't really the Johnson ones, since they were sympathetic. It's specifically because of Grant, and this is actually one of the big reasons why they, in 1876, Samuel Tilden actually came really close to unseating the Republicans. Like, to give you an idea,
yeah,
1876 was so close that it actually was decided in a smoky room debate. Like,
well,
your
actually,
your
no,
votes didn't matter. It was decided in a smoky room. The
they bring
Democrats
that up.
basically said,
They,
cut
they, they
Reconstruction and we'll let Rutherford B. Hayes win.
it was, hey, they actually bring that up next. It was the Southern Democrats disputed 20 votes, which was enough to actually change it. Um, a lot of this may have been due to intimidation in Louisiana and South Carolina. Democrats adding a confusing ballot in Florida. Oh, what a surprise! A ballot issue in Florida.
Yeah, they're not. It's not unfamiliar to Florida.
Uh, so ultimately, because even if the college decides, Congress is the one that has to certify it. So the South decides, okay, we will give you the votes or give you the
We'll let
presidency
you win if you just cut this.
if you cut it, and
Which,
they did,
which
and
leads to one
that
of the funniest things ever. The nation of Paraguay absolutely fucking loves Rutherford B. Hayes.
well, no, not because of the end of Reconstruction, but because he acknowledged some land rights in
He not
Paraguay.
only acknowledged land rights, he actually went, "Wow, Paraguay, you went through a horrible war. We should help you get back up on your feet." And that is why Rutherford B. Hayes is the most popular American president in Paraguay ever, and why he has cities and streets named after him.
But with this, the last federal troops leave the South, and this is when the South completely goes into overdrive on denying black people their legitimate rights.
I mean, Jim Crow was still around at this point, but this is when. So
This
during
is
this
what
time period, this is
they were
actually
open,
the period where you could actually get elected into office as a black man in the South.
and they did.
Yep.
It was then immediately shut down
Oh
by
yeah.
by the virulent racist South. Uh,
Well, I mean, you got to pay for a poll tax, which is about $10. Shit, which is a lot of money at the time.
yep.
Also, you got to be able to prove that you can read. Oh, you're able to. Don't worry, you can go to the poll, and then you see like dudes in like fucking hoods, just like holding
Well,
a cudgel.
no, that even if you can read, they give you that literacy test. They are designed to be obtuse, confusing. Um,
Yeah, even if you pass it though, that's where the cudgels come in.
yeah, they
It,
will deny, and then of course we then get legally things like Plessy v. Ferguson,
that's 1890s, but yeah,
90s, but as it goes on. So the next thing they bring up is the growing interpretation in the 1850s of why slavery is okay. Why, you know what? Listen, God ordained it to benefit the black soul.
the most fucked up thing is there's actually a modern cult that still believes that. Look up the 12 tribes. They're a Christian cult that runs Delhi, and legitimately the best part is they're anti-Semitic, but they try to really hard Hebrewize themselves.
So
So
I
when
do want
when
to
you
make
join the cult, you have to pick a Judaic name. They refer to Jesus by his Hebrew name, Yeshua. It's weird. It's really fucking weird.
so here's my question. Do they if they're a deli, do they sell black and white cookies or do they not allow it to mix?
Well, I mean the original owner of the cult, Yornek or whatever his name is, he was of the belief that slavery was legitimately a proper use for people who could not contribute to society in any other way on their own volition. And he notedly disliked Martin Luther King Jr. So what does
Ah,
that tell you?
Um,
They also used to go around to Grateful Dead concerts in their weird bus and basically get homeless people and drug addicts on the bus and then basically hold them hostage until they join the cult.
oh, they still active.
There's 3,000 members still, yes.
Jesus Christ.
They also have branches in Germany as well as the US.
Why Germany of all places?
They also own a business called the Yellow Deli. There are 30 locations for it. And they don't get paid when they work there. They are paid in room and board.
Oh, oh, so they're so they view their employees as slaves essentially.
Yes. Oh, they also believe that you can beat your children as young as 6 months old with a rod.
Okay, moving on from the horrifying modern day treatment of human beings, let's go to the historical one
Yep.
where claims of phrenology.
Well,
Uh,
we'll go into that, but also
yeah.
justice deferred. This kind of goes into the reparations thing, which by this point, I'm sorry, but like, no.
Well, it doesn't really go into. It goes into this, and this is true. No Confederate leader ever faced serious punishment. The
If you're
um
wondering why, the idea, this was Lincoln's idea. He wanted to basically get the nation built back up to where it was as quickly as he could. His Congress disagreed, and Andrew Johnson doubled down and wrote a
yeah.
lot of pardons.
the the only one that apparently was tried is Henry Wurz, who ran Andersonville Prison,
Which is one of the worst
which
prisons that was in the
yeah,
CSA.
which in this case he was fucking horrifying.
Oh
Like,
no, like you think Nathan Bedford Forrest and Jubal Early were bad? No, Wurs made them
you
look kind.
you can at least say
At least they would
these were
just kill. At least they would just
yeah,
kill escaped slaves.
yeah, generals or like Lee, General Davis led the government. He wasn't doing, it wasn't like he was, you know, electrifying prisoners of war, which I don't think they did in Andersonville was just horribly run, but this is the reason why, you charge the people for the horrific crimes. They all should have been charged for treason. Um,
Again, the idea was because I actually remember it specifically. They didn't want to do that in fear of lionization, and also they didn't want to do that again to hasten reintegration of the southern states into the Union.
yeah, I believe there's a part, is it in the 15th or no, it's in the 14th Amendment
Which, if
where it
you're
says,
wondering why this was the logic, it's specifically just to quote Abraham Lincoln. To make sure that this country stands together, I would legalize slavery in every state. To make sure this country stands together, I would ban it in every state. I will do anything to make sure that our house stands united and strong. He was only against slavery because it was the better option during the Civil War.
uh,
Just I'm pointing that out. That's an actual
yeah,
thing with Lincoln.
but I believe
He himself
there's
personally thought it was an abhorrent institution, but if it saved the United States, he would have let it
there,
continue.
yeah, there was a there's a line in the 14th Amendment though that says that if you did commit treason, you are not allowed to hold office. I think it's only been used twice,
Yep, and one of
or
that was
a
the
few
aftermath of the Civil War. Basically, yeah,
Civil
they were
War, and
slapped
the
on the
other
white
one
list,
was recently with the January 6th stuff.
which I
Uh,
think is interesting given the riots the
it
year
was
prior.
interesting. It was interesting because it wasn't for federal. Like the issue is not, well, should it be tried even though it was probably used for the Confederacy. No, it's because this was a state office. I don't remember the ruling on that. Um, but it tells you how much we did not punish the people that committed treason against the United States.
Yeah,
Um, and as we have the slaughterhouse cases of 1873, uh, which I am not that familiar with.
neither am I, just because that's not the one I usually think of.
Yeah, you think of Plessy v. Ferguson, the slaughterhouse cases. Um, So let's the Louisiana legislature newly established a corporation. The um, members of a slaughter for regulating slaughterhouse industry. Members of the board challenged it on the 14th, claiming it violated the 14th Amendment. Um, this was actually, I guess, this was more of a labor case than a like a civil rights case. But it does eventually lay down the idea of separate but equal. That essentially the states are regulating equal treatment, and as long as they have separate facilities, it's all good. Doesn't matter the quality of those facilities, as
Yeah,
long as they have different ones.
it basically stands until the 1950s when it finally starts to get destroyed.
So, what does this mean for beasts? We finally get to how does this relate to the game? Uh, a freedman nemesis may fight to punish former slave masters, while a Confederate veteran tyrant may choose to feed on the nightmares of Yankees he holds responsible for ruining his society.
I like how they're trying to ignore the elephant in the room that they've accidentally created by doing this setting.
Which is it not being a human monster, but a monstrous human.
No, the other, because they gave three examples. They didn't go for the one that you know is a thing you can do. Why the hell would you do it?
Uh, to a certain extent, this makes life easy for beasts. Begotten, after all, hold themselves accountable to nothing except their horrors.
Making them
The
complete
racial and class anx-
sociopathic piece of shit.
yeah, the racial and class anxieties in the South offer a delicious spread of fears to feed their horrors.
What are they?
Even if
Grifters?
wait, even if an individual beast does not necessarily possess any egregious bigotry, he's usually not above exploiting such fears to get a good meal. What the fuck?
Don't you like how even the most awful of people have to be like, oh no, I don't actually believe in these repulsive beliefs?
Like we
It's like if you made like a horrible orc warlord who believes in survival of the fittest, and his death fortress is still wheelchair accessible. What the fuck, man?
well, no, you see, he's a disability rights supremacist. Only those on wheels will survive the coming war.
That would actually be really funny, where it's like only wheelchair accessible, and like they make ways to make it impossible to walk.
Every orc that's born gets their legs chopped off immediately and hooked onto an a pig iron forged wheelchair with spikes and rockets.
I'm just envisioning a death pit where basically you have to use the wheelchair lift that goes, like that you sit down and you let it ride along, and it detects if you have legs. So if you're too heavy, you just fall to your death.
Oh, that's brilliant. Um, oh, here's this. Observing how beasts interact with the South may offer a clearer perspective on why Reconstruction failed. Oh, it
Oh,
wasn't the fact that nobody really gave a shit about it, nobody really wanted to do it, and those
and
who did were not
when faced
politically
with the
around.
consequences, they actually joined in on it, like in the North
Yeah,
when they finally had a bunch of slaves coming in, former
yeah.
slaves.
It
Jesus
it's
Christ.
it's blame it all on the supernatural.
No, no. You need to use this book to educate yourself. We need to enlighten you on why slavery bad. Why slavery based on race bad. We think
Well,
you're so morally repulsive because you play
yeah.
beast that you need to
After
use
after
this.
all, a beast's most emotionally and ethically fulfilling meal usually comes when her victim learns an important lesson. Without a sense of purpose or cultural unity, these lessons lose their meaning. A white supremacist might wake up to the pain she has caused, but a different man gets taught the perils of supporting black voting rights.
There we go. They finally did the elephant in the room. I'm just now envisioning a beast being responsible for the birth of the nation film.
So what? He tortured uh, W. E.
No,
W.
no,
Griffith.
no. What they did was they actually made it themselves and then just gave it to the guy who claimed to create it. Like, here you go. This'll teach them. This'll teach the United States the lessons they need to know.
This would mean if you're role playing it, you'd have to role play these beasts wearing blackface because that's what they did for the black actors. They didn't hire any.
No. The best part is the Beast walk in. We're willing to do this for free.
And then
We're doing
I'm
this for
guessing. Well,
free.
no, Griffith sees this. It's like, why the fuck is this 3 hours long?
The lesson's a long and harsh one. What's the lesson?
What's the
Ah,
lesson? Um, the South was better when those were in their place.
look at those guys in the hoods. Aren't they cool? And that's why the second clan
They're
actually
they're
came around.
they're
I'm
sa-
not
they're
even kidding.
safe.
It's because of
Yeah,
Birth of a Nation. They made
they're
the
safe.
made the
Well, no,
clan.
no. Yeah, they're saving these women from getting raped by black Union soldiers.
That's literally the plot, and that's why the KKK came back. It died
That's the
by this
second
point.
half. That's the second. The first half is just getting to the war. As in the men get sent off and fight, and I will recommend, if you have the time, do watch it. It is one of the most influential films uh due
It's
to
the
it
first
using new
long form
filming
film.
techniques.
It pioneered a lot of filming techniques. All of this effort to make this piece of fucking shit.
I mean, it also then gives you an insight into how Americans, and not the majority, there was a lot of protest at the release of this film, but how a good portion of Americans viewed the Civil War and viewed its effects at the time.
Thank you, Jew Ball Early. Very cool. You have a special grave in hell for yourself. He's responsible. If you're wondering why I bring up Early so much, he's responsible for the lost cause bullshit. Like, most of the garbage you hear about that is from him. Anyway, the
So,
rise of Jim Crow.
so Jim Crow is the way. Hey, how can we ensure that black people don't have rights?
How can we make
We
sure that we never elect one of them again?
we make separate but equal facilities. See, they have
I don't want to see them when I go drinking. It'll make my beating hand too painful because I have to use it. Anyway, I'm gonna stop there because holy shit, this is just awful.
yeah. Um, and the thing is, even when they flee, when black families leave the South, they go to Oklahoma, they go to Chicago, they go to California. It's still not good. There
Well,
is
yeah,
a
because basically there was always racism anyway, just because you look really
yeah.
fucking different. On top of that, you're competing with their jobs. This actually is a big problem. This was a big problem and still was a big problem up until the 1970s, where you'd go from the south and then find yourself a new job up in the north. And because you're both A, different, and B, competing with the labor pool that was already there, uh, yeah, racial clashes.
Numerous race riots in the 1900s.
Thank you, Milwaukee. Very cool. Also, thank you, every city in fucking California. By the way, it's actually due to the racial tensions that gun laws were actually made even stricter. Thank you, Ronald Reagan. Very cool.
So there was also
Basically, in short, the Black Panthers were doing concealed carry. It had conceal and carry, like they would get licenses and shit like that for just holding guns. Ronald Reagan was terrified of that, so that's why he made gun laws stricter in California.
I don't
Li-
want to see them with guns running around. I'm afraid they'll start a riot.
It's bad enough that I have to know who's coming to dinner, but I don't want them to have a gun.
Listen, why are they fighting here when they couldn't be sent to Vietnam?
Just yeah.
Yeah. So next up is, as you said, even if they're able to pass through all those Jim Crow laws, you have to deal with terrorism. The Ku Klux Klan with their Kleagles.
Yep, they're Kleagles and the Great Goblins, the Grand Wizards. These are
Yeah,
all names, by the way.
it's a fucking RPG like terminology.
Like legitimately, if you really wanted to, you could totally take the clan, just like rename it, give different costumes, just like the structure alone. If you just make sure that you don't, like you change it enough, You can use them in any RPG.
Oh, the other thing, you want to know what they called their sacred text?
Please,
The cl-
was it the Klybel?
no, the Chloran. The chlor. I believe actually they there was a Superman radio show back in the 30s that
There
revealed
was.
all this.
Actually, if you want to know what one of the funniest things is, the reason the second clan collapsed as bad as it did, part of it was because of the Indiana branch, but most of it was because of the radio broadcasts of Superman fucking dunking on them. Because this was when Superman was really big in pop culture. So you imagine this like 4-hour radio broadcast series where it's like, and this is what these stupid motherfuckers believe. Look at them and look at the disgusting things they do. It isn't some cool party where you have picnics and wear cool costumes. Look at what they do to normal people like you and me. Look at the stupid garbage they believe in.
It's like revealing that some sort of modern day white supremacist organization is led by a guy who uh, went to his roommate's room to search if he had been jerking off, and is labeled a cum hunter, or that the same guy was dating cat boys.
The closest equivalent to Superman destroying the clan is actually the time some weird anti-Semite guy destroyed EDP for
Wait,
being
what?
what he was. Oh, remember that Rosenstein guy who did a lot of weird like Jewish jokes or whatever, like the weird anti-Semite guy?
No, never heard of this guy. I'm more focused
He's
on the
the guy
fact.
that outed him by having him go, "Oh, you were looking for cupcakes?"
Oh,
That's the guy.
no. I was more focused on Nick Fuentes and his groipers just revealing that the guy is a
It
catboy lover.
it's actually legitimately like every right-wing grifter you run into, just finding out they're incidentally they bat for the other team.
Yeah, that usually seems to be the case. How many
You got Ted Haggard,
evangelical,
you got
yeah,
you got
how
Nick
many
Fuentes, you got that one guy with the beard.
those evangelical priests chanting about the degeneracy of homosexuality were found sucking cock in a back alley.
Actually, yeah, not Nito. Scientology and South Park treatment. That's actually dead
Yeah.
accurate. That is dead accurate to what Superman did to the Klan.
Also, to bring up the reason it's 3 hours, it legitimately has an intermission. Treat it like it's going to the theater.
This actually gives me one of the dumbest and worst ideas I've ever thought of. Birth of a Nation, the Bollywood production, where it's like 4 hours long and it's
What?
dance
Okay,
sequences.
that's just gonna start that's gonna start the nuclear war against Pakistan and India.
So if you want the Kali Yuga, please. Oh my god.
So back onto the horror of Reconstruction.
So back onto the this is us trying to get you to be an activist.
Yeah.
Here
So
is all of the bad things, and like none of it has anything to do with the time period we're having you play in.
well, now they have brought up the lynchings, the
Well, no,
mob
yeah, the
action.
clan, yeah, like this is actually pretty accurate. It's just
Though,
they
yeah,
put less effort into this section than they did about women, like, and they're rolling. Oh my god, what the fuck?
they do bring up the cross burning was only for in the 20th century,
Yeah, it's only for the second clan. The original clan didn't do that. Um,
and the whole reason they had the hoods so that none of the black residents can identify if these people are people that they know.
yep. Also, again, I really hate that this is all they talk about when it comes to the hate groups. I really feel like that should have been more covered.
They do bring up that some Southern whites did oppose the Klan.
They did.
Um, However, over 1,000 white people did lose their lives
Yep.
to advocate for justice.
I legitimately hate they put less effort here than they did with the what's the thing that pissed me off? That stupid women one. Where yeah,
um,
gender and sexual politics. They put less effort in the actual hate groups that you're gonna run into than a fucking backstory for like slave revolts and whatever. I kind of
the
hate
next
that.
thing Yeah, the next thing they bring up though that associates more with beast is this concept of community ties.
Yep,
That
blood is thicker than fear.
yeah, when you're in these smaller towns, there's a sense of community. Um, some beasts, um, they can feel more isolated, though. Um, living quarters with people that they love, but can't stop thinking of them as prey. Um,
Well, I mean, this is
they res-
like we're talking about the South. You got a lot of small community, like small communities and parishes. We're talking like 180 people, maybe. There's not a lot out there, and a lot of it's wild hinterland, especially if you go up to like the Shenandoah Valley, the hills around the hills of the Appalachians. Like, there's not a lot of people there. And honestly, you know what
and
this is making me think of that would be a lot fucking cooler than this?
a hunter.
Bigfoot. No, no, no. Deviant the Renegade, where the big thing is Bigfoot sightings or cryptids or legends in like the late 19th century Appalachia.
Oh,
That would be a lot more fun than what the fuck we're reading right now.
eh, they do bring up that there's a possibility of some beasts actually confessing their nature, and they were still found and accepted by the local community.
Look, I only torture everyone to make myself feel better, so please accept me for being a violent piece of shit.
Please don't change so I can feed off of you.
Please allow me to torment your child by making them have night terrors. Please allow me to commit horrible pogroms against the others, so so that I can still
Yeah.
feed off. Oh my god, I hate this.
They then bring up sharecropping, which is
Hey, that's
essentially,
reasonable. That's a big thing.
yep. So after emancipation, there's a lot of previously enslaved workers whose skills are in agriculture,
Yep,
and there's a lot of former planters who have land but no workers.
yep.
So what do? Well, they can't enslave them anymore because of the 13th Amendment. So what they do is instead provide them a place to live, tools, food, and all in ex- and you know, all in exchanges, he just takes that out of your pay. Turns out that that's most of your pay. Um, in fact, apparently, many white farmers actually end up in sharecropping because
Well, I mean,
economic problems.
most local farmers also they just didn't do as well as their peers because
Yeah.
farming's kind of a big man's game if you want to actually make money. If you want to make money, if you want to feed yourself, usually it's just enough to cover yourself for subsistence.
There's
Sharecropping
also
started as a way to basically get back slaves and just kind of work the system and gain their power back, but it also kind of exploited everyone in general. It only benefited the rich plantation owners. Also, because of their refusal to change their crops, this actually leads to the boll weevil blight that fucks over cotton production. Also, a complete collapse of the soil viability.
and I assume the
That's why,
mobility of yeah.
if you're wondering, George Washington Carver, the man who found 1,000 different ways to use peanuts, actually started his studies trying to fix the soil quality in the South. Because that's how
That
bad cotton is if that's all you grow.
actually they say the sharecropper grows what his landlord tells him, usually cotton, tobacco, or peanuts.
Yep,
So
and all of them. The reason they grow peanuts particularly is because of the nitrate nodes that they have in their root systems, which help replenish crops. Basically,
the
cotton is a very harsh system on soils. The
yeah.
study of agriculture was pretty advanced at this point, but there's a lot of stuff that we weren't aware of at this point, which included what causes soils to lose their ability to fertilize. We only knew that you had to provide chemicals, minerals, and that sort of shit.
So within this economy, you end up having, especially post Reconstruction, more women working,
Mostly
especially
because
in
they
rural
had to.
areas. Yeah, there are businesswomen that are starting to come up, but obviously the culture, uh, especially in the South, will
Well,
look
also
down upon
straight
them.
up, it just kind of follows real life because if you ever actually look at the Forbes most successful women, Like the top 30, I believe it's something like 22 of them were legitimately just either inherited it from their parents or they married into it and started their own stuff based on their husband's starting money. I'm not knocking. I'm just pointing out like that's a thing that's still a thing today.
It's essentially the same that happens to anything. The people that are rich or that make money will and leave it for their offspring. And
And then they'll burn it to the fucking ground. Yeah.
uh, next thing that they bring up though is Americans of other colors, because despite the setting focusing on the issues of African Americans and white people,
I wonder if they're going to talk about the Cherokee owning slaves.
they I don't think they do.
Well,
They do bring up the that the Seminole had previously settled in
oh yeah, they're
Florida.
going to bring that one up. If you're wondering why they're mentioning the Seminole specifically, the Seminole also adopted a lot of freed slaves into their tribe.
Oh,
That's
I did
why they're
not know that.
bringing them up. They're not going to bring up the Cherokee though, because that makes them look bad. You can't make a tribe look bad for their horrible decisions in a time period.
Yeah. Um, the other issue they bring up though is the concept of a mixed ancestry.
I wonder if they're going to point out that, funnily enough, Hispanics were treated as white, and they were only hated for being Catholic at this time.
They don't bring that up. They do say there's a
I wonder if they're also
difficult
going
and
to bring up
complex
that
web of.
Indians were also treated as white, like South Asians were treated as white originally.
They bring up Asians. They don't bring up South Asians.
By the way, you
They
want to
do.
know why I'm bringing that up? Because they had enough effort to look into slave revolts, but they didn't have enough effort to look in how other fucking ethnicities were handled during this period. I kind of hate that. I kind of hate that they're not talking about how shittily the Chinese immigrants were treated in this time period.
Well, listen, we have to talk about labor rights in the early 1800s.
Our
It's
railroads are
pivotal.
built on the bones of the Hakka community of China, as well as the
No, no,
Yue
no,
and Han.
no. As in, like, fucking Chicago style labor. We need to talk about that when we're talking about the South and
The
Reconstruction.
canals were built on the bones of Irishmen.
They do bring up, though, the concept of passing, as in somebody who is of mixed ancestry but looks white.
By the way, one of my favorite things is they're talking about the one drop rule when it's disgustingly still in effect today.
And it's a legacy of this era.
Imagine still trying to use the one drop rule.
The concept of who is black, what is being black, the issue of culture. It all stems from, well, the United States not resolving the issue of race
There are efforts, but what happens is you have people who want it to stay the same so they can, feed
because
off
they
of them
benefit
like the
from it.
beasts.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, fake activists.
While beasts naturally build ties with others of their kind, can a beast with a black mother ever really trust her fellow beasts will accept her if they knew? Which means great, you're playing with a bunch of racists. What's that phrase? If you're in a bar with like five Nazis, you're in a Nazi bar.
I'm
If
just
you're
now
if
I'm just now
if you're in a
envisioning
beast game with five racists,
I'm just now envisioning the Beast game where they reveal it's like, oh, thank God, I thought you were a Seminole. What? Seminole shot my leg out, shot my granddad's leg out during the war. Fucking hate them. Thank goodness you're
uh,
just mixed race from a black man.
we then get into the
No, 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 no.
wonderful.
What's funny is they reveal their mixed race. It's like, wait, are you like Chinese? And then she says, no. Oh, thank goodness.
Hey, thank goodness we're all God-fearing Christians. Yeah.
The one Slavic one that worships Orthodox Church. Because if you're wondering, Eastern Orthodoxy was seen as really fucking weird, even more so than Catholics.
No, no, actually, I find telling. Thank goodness we're all God-fearing Zoroastrianists in just a complete Southern accent.
No, no, no. I got
Azura
it.
Mata.
Thank goodness we're all Seventh Day Adventists. Now we gotta rest because it's the
Yeah.
Sabbath.
Um, But now we have the rise of the lost cause,
So
which
yeah,
it
this is one of the
which
most
is
disgusting legacies from this
yeah,
period, in my
which
opinion.
is where no. We had legitimate reasons for revolting. It wasn't because we desperately wanted to keep people enslaved and in bondage.
By the way, I hate that they're using Jefferson Davis alone because the big advocate was Jubal A. Early. Davis was a part of it, and the books they were mentioning were pretty bad, but it's also Jubal Early. I don't like.
The thing is, I would argue there was a reason why this catches on. It essentially allows.
It allows them to justify, oh well, no, we ain't horrible people for enslaving people as property, as they scream and feel and think like we do. We ain't
It, al- it,
horrible
al-
fucking people for that. No, it's the North's fault. Ignore my flaws. Ignore all my flaws. Get out of here, Mir. Throws it out like a three-story fucking window.
it also means the North doesn't have to question why they did nothing after the Civil War.
Oh, thank goodness we don't have to explain why conditions are awful in Chicago for the new transplants from the South.
It calls back to a nostalgic time where everyone was in their proper place. You had the Southern gentleman,
You
the
know,
Southern belle,
the
and
rapists who would
yeah,
molest their literal fucking servants.
and that one
By the way, if you're
slave
wondering,
child that mysteriously looks like the slave owner.
not only that, but if you ever wonder if someone says they have Cherokee ancestry, there's decent odds that it's actually a black ancestor if they're white or a white ancestor if they're black. It's not
Because
guaranteed,
that
but
was
it's good
that
odds.
was because again, that was better than claiming that it was either white or black. Shows you how fucked up things were.
But yeah, the lost cause becomes really popular. It's the same reason why whenever you see people trying to advocate and like go, look, the Nazis look cool because of Hugo Boss, it ignores the part where they were weird shud freaks that were obsessed with taking meth and talking crazy shit like we gotta go to India so we can find the true root of the right race in Greenland and Thule. Like, drug-addled psychos. No, no, they were respectful. The Germans were respect. No, they were coked out fucking brutes.
Hitler restored Germany. No, he grifted them. He made fake money, promising all these
No, not
advanced
just fake money. He got a guy to make fake IOU bills to the companies
to the companies,
because the MIFO bills were literally fake money, but like fake IOUs.
all while governing the entire economy by essentially making each industry a fucking fiefdom of the party and fighting against each other, stealing the wealth of all the other countries that he would take over, and then
Duplicating the army three different times because
duplicating the army to be a political group led by a fucking failed chicken farmer.
a failed chicken farmer, a coked out World War One pilot who's still on morphine because the Luftwaffe had its own army.
And I'm going to
Waffen-Feld
be
divisions. They wore blue.
spending a shit ton of resources to murder a bunch of random people in the middle of Eastern Europe because somehow uh, that booby and that shtetl in Lithuania is somehow a threat that's going to corrupt and destroy Germany.
I once got food poisoning from a Kanish. They must be punished. By the way, if you've never had them, Kanishas are fucking good. So it's really good street food. Babkas are also really good.
Moving outside of the craziness of racism, Southern living in American culture, and this thing is that Southern culture influences a lot of American culture. The concept of Caribbean style barbecue,
Yep.
of
Well, I mean, it's
pulled
not just
pork,
Caribbean. This
you know,
is this is a load of this is partially a load of hooey. Some of it is also just because of ties to the Latin world in general. It's not just Caribbean because this
you know,
style of cooking is also very popular in Mexico. So basically, the concept is you have a tough piece of shit meat, right? You have disgusting because brisket is tough as fuck unless you slow cook it. You got rump roast. Well, you just put that thing in the cooker for like a day, and then you get it tasting real good, especially if you got salt and pepper. Or if you don't got pepper, you can just use the chili peppers and cover it in a sauce. Then you pair it with green beans, okra, or just whatever you got available. If you're real desperate, you can make turkey neck soup. Also, if you're wondering, different southern states have different barbecue styles. There's Carolina Gold, and then you got two different styles in North Carolina. My favorite being the North Carolina vinegar mop style. Then you got the Texas barbecue with the steak, with steak and beef. And then you got Kansas City style, which that's the most common one. If you know that sweet sauce stuff, like the crap on the McRib, that's Kansas City style barbecue.
Oh.
Then you got
Hmm.
Alabama style barbecue, which is a white sauce that's mayonnaise based, and their preferred meat of choice is chicken. Then you got basically you had a bunch of different cultures kind of form about due to a mixture of West African ties, the Caribbean because of rum running, and you have the English elements. Combine that with the French cooking of Louisiana and a little bit of influence from Mexico because of Texas, and that's where Southern cooking comes from. Also, because it's a poorer region, you kind of have to figure out how the fuck am I going to cook something for people.
Yeah.
That's why beef barbecue is actually pretty rare in the South. It's usually pork and chicken.
Yeah. As this pulled pork, slow cooked ribs. This I did not know. Coca-Cola was developed by a Confederate veteran,
He
John
was.
Pemberton,
It was
as a
originally
health tonic.
because soda originally was designed to be a health tonic. The carbonated water was supposed to be reinforced with minerals, and it was supposed to help with digestion and also to alleviate. Coca-Cola also had small traces of cocaine in it, which is why it was sometimes issued as a way to as a stimulant or to deal with fatigue or like a cold.
No wonder it helped him get off morphine. No
Legitimately,
wonder.
Coca-Cola was originally issued as like a way to get people who were tired or who were sick, who needed a bit of energy to kind of fight off the illness. The Coke helped.
Jack Daniels is the son of another veteran, and we get
If you're
Jack
also
Daniels, son
wondering,
of
Pepsi-Cola also was another Southern invention.
uh, music. I would go, I guess
You
you could argue
got
this.
blues. Yep, blues is
Modern
one.
music, because modern music, because you can go from jazz, rock and roll, and you could go off on all of the
Gospel.
different genres.
They're missing
It
gospel.
is, well, they say it comes out of the spirituals, which I guess you could argue comes from that, but
Also, it's not purely black. Like they're forgetting country
yeah, country.
and
Without
bluegrass
all of
also.
that, there is no modern music. I guess, yeah, you could say the southern United States created modern music.
Yeah, I mean, because think about it. The South was a shithole nightmare to be in. Wouldn't you want to cry about life using the blues? Or talking about how things will always be a bit better? That's why country and rap actually talk about the same stuff, just from a different point of view.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Although
Both
although
talk
it's
about
funny,
their cars, both talk about their women, and both talk about how much it fucking sucks sometimes.
is that you can trace this, you trace these types of work songs and spirituals to the songs of anal cunt.
Yeah, yeah, that's a southern invention.
You also have literature. Yeah, Mark Twain, Tennessee Williams,
Hmm.
Harper Lee, Truman Capote. And the other thing, hospitality. I, I I haven't been that much in the southern United States, but it is true. Southern United States has this friendly atmosphere of hospitality. They are open, generous. Um, they are willing to, help people out, mostly if they seem trustworthy. Um, Different from the Midwest, where they're friendly, but
They're friendly, but if you step on my property, I'm gonna fill your guts
yeah.
full of lead.
Um, but there is
They
a
won't find you in the cornfield because the
yeah,
sheriff will teach me how to hide the body better after the last time. Not even kidding. That was the Midwestern sheriff once talked about a guy who was killed because he was outed as a nonce, and the guy legitimately was offering tips on how to hide the body better, like during the interview.
wow,
I mean, the dude was a predator, so
yeah,
I'm not surprised that that guy did. But that's like your Midwest kind of thing.
yes. But now on to the supernatural. So How did the supernatural react to the Civil War?
Violent disgust and mutualistic vomiting, I guess.
Exactly. There was a mage war between the Diamond Orders and the Nameless. I don't know what those are.
Man, I wish Tech was here. He'd be able to explain this to us so
Diamond
good.
became the Pentacle and newly congealed
Communists
order.
and anarchists. Oh boy, we
Wait,
got
what?
communist
What?
mages on
Where?
this one.
Where? What?
The Nameless came to unite under the banner of the Free Council at the end of the conflict, though some communist and anarchist libertines may resent the military terminology. We got communist mages. Okay, this is starting to win me over. Not really. This one sucks,
Yeah.
but that's funny.
This is saying that I guess there was a conflict between the different orders.
Well, the best part
Um,
is it wasn't a war with the exarchs at all. It's not a war with the Seers of the Throne. This was just a mage war between the other traditions, essentially.
well, no, there was something that the Seers of the Throne were doing. They um they were kicking out women. This when the Seers of the Throne started and consolidated over the American Metal Association in 1847, they quickly tried to push women out of the informal medical practice as a means of reclaiming control over what has traditionally become a way for women to express political and social influence.
This feels like the writer had a cudgel to say. They care more about they're bitching more about women's rights than the rights of the fucking black people in this time. Have
Also,
you
wait,
noticed
hold
that?
on. Is this the Seers or is this the technocracy? Because they're now saying um, the Seers of the Throne start to trivialize medical miracles, twisting the lie to construct mundane solutions to what requires supernal intervention.
Haven't you noticed that this book bitches more about the rights of women in the book about the rights of slaves? This is bitching more about the rights of women than the poor black people that legitimately were fucking treated as property.
I
What
would argue
the
that there
fuck?
is something that goes hand in hand in this time period, but
It
no, they
does,
should have
but what the fuck?
focused much more on centralize the narrative on
How do I
slavery.
make this horrible time period about me? That's the vibe I'm getting from this.
I'm
I
I
mean,
guess this
I'd rather she write this than the abuser. Like this is still more interesting than the
yeah.
Beast book was, so I'm gonna give it props just for that. It's the best thing we've read besides a couple of bits from one of the other ones.
Like you could have taken the whole thing of the women out, but focus on the Seers of the Throne trying to trivialize medical miracles, and as a result, that's why we get the horrific surgeries. And hey, I'm gonna saw your leg off. Hold on to this piece of wood as I tear it open.
So what you're saying is that the person writing this was writing this from the point of view of Mage the Ascension in a fit of stupidity.
Maybe.
This feels more like a
Um,
Mage the Ascension thing.
for a group with control over the physical laws of the
Yeah,
universe.
this is like a
Wait,
Mage the Ascension thing. What the
wait, no, no.
fuck?
I have to read this line. For a group with control over the physical laws of the universe, the Seers of the Throne had significantly more trouble securing control over the litigative and legislative elements of society.
Ha
The
ha
mages
ha
could not beat the lawyers.
ha ha. It's funny. It funny.
Oh, they do bring up Charles Sumner in
I
1856.
I ain't gonna lie. This section sucks.
Um, yeah, I
No,
don't know
let's
why
just
we're going over
continue.
the
But
Bar
this is terrible.
Association.
This is fucking
Oh
terrible.
no, I guess the Diamond and the Pentacle groups they took over control of the American Bar Association. So I guess wizards control the lawyers.
Yeah,
Um,
this
mages
really
during
feels
and
like a Mage the Ascension War for Paradigm. Like this is one of the worst things I've ever read in Chronicles of Darkness. Don't get me wrong. The Paradigm Wars in Mage the Ascension are fun in their own way. I don't like talking about them because holy shit, you can only rehash the same point over and over again. But
yeah.
when I play Mage the Awakening, you know what I don't want to fucking see? I don't want to see a goddamn Paradigm War. You play Awakening because you're trying to get away from that. What the fuck? At least
Well,
partially.
next up is vampires,
By the way, as
and
for Mage and Beasts during the Civil
yeah,
War, they kind of briefly they put more effort into bitching about the. Oh, I hate this so much.
yeah,
The
I
Beast feel like, yeah, it is an afterthought. This was just a, you have to be educated to be more tolerant, particularly towards women. I mean, the minorities who were treated poorly in the past. That's kind of the vibe I got from this one.
Not just that, but also, and you know what? You could perfectly be the one that's persecuting the minorities.
That's my favorite moment is you can legitimately just start a beast aligned clan order. That's so fucking awful.
But going on to the
This
vampires,
would be like okay. This would be like if they did a beast setting during in the aftermath of Kristallnacht.
oh, I did come up with the idea once of what if you did a splat of vampire in a death camp? And that's fucking horrible because you're the one essentially perpetrating the atrocities.
I
Which it's different from like the Shoah, where it's a reflection on the effects of the atrocity.
you know it'd be a really sad but interesting game you could do in a camp like that. A
What?
Prometheans game where you get back up
Oh no.
after the
Oh no,
yeah.
no, 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 no,
That would not be good.
no.
That would
Well,
be terrible.
also because you would be killed right after.
Yeah.
Um, and what the disquiet would do is,
Yeah.
um,
There's a reason why you don't really cover that topic, and this is why I don't think you should have covered
now
Reconstruction.
you could do a post World War II
Oh yeah, like no, after the liberation of the camp. They
after the
like
liberation of the
right
camp.
after the liberation, and
It is a
it's during the.
golem, or yeah, it's a golem made out of
Oh, no, this
a
is cool because
cursed.
think about it.
Yeah,
You awaken right as you awaken in the middle of like a fucking horrible cube box of death. As you hear tanks rolling in and you see a pale GI looking in horror at not just you but everyone else around you. You have no idea what's going on, and you are slowly learning to integrate to society for the resettlement of well the mandate. You're going home to Zion.
a home that you have no idea. You don't
Wouldn't
know
that
what home is.
wouldn't that be interesting though? Like
You know
from
what? Yeah,
19
that would be
that
and essentially you're a part of a community that you legitimately have no connection to outside of suffering.
and on top
But
of
there is,
that,
but the community tells you there is something more than that.
but the community also starts to shun you, but you're still a part of it because of the disquiet you bring.
And then if you want to play into that of being in the Mandate of Palestine at that time, the disquiet affecting relations between Jews and Arabs and the British. Um, and then eventually, actually, then it finally breaks. It's 1948. A a golem fighting for the Israelis.
Doesn't that sound like a really fun Dark Era setting? Like in terms of
Yeah,
what you can do with it?
they would never do this because they would never touch that setting with a 10-foot pole, not because of its disturbing issue, but because it involves Israel.
Well, I mean, they also did Reconstruction Era South, which I think is more. You, you kind of have to not be careful, but you have to think of for what the fuck you're planning when you're doing this. Don't get me wrong,
Exactly.
you could easily do like Reconstruction Era is really fascinating. Just
Like,
be
I would think there is a point to this where a
and
beast
using
it's
beasts, it's
essentially
not the worst idea.
if a beast is supposed to teach people a lesson, then the result of Reconstruction is that they never taught a lesson and nobody learned one.
You could do, and that's why I understand why they picked it. It's just they fucking dropped the ball on this.
Just maybe don't say that yes, you can play as the Ku Klux Klan
Or if you do, point out how horrifying you are for doing it.
and how a lot of them will shunt you.
Or
Like
maybe just
essentially point
don't.
out that the beasts, since they recognize their horrifying nature. They don't want to. They feed on suffering, but they don't want to create more of it.
Actually, you know what would be a much better splat to use for this setting? Changeling.
Ah,
Because think about it, you're a free changeling after being essentially treated as property by the Fae, by the fair folk, and then you stumble into this. like it's 1866. It's during the beginning of Johnson's attempts to undo Reconstruction, or at least obstruct it, and it goes up until Grant, and then finally Hayes. And it's just, you are changeling, and possibly even demons. You could do a demon, or alternatively, you could do a Promethean.
Oh, Demon would be fun, especially considering the post. Like if you focused more on the cities,
Yeah,
I
like
think they
the
do bring.
Reconstruction of like Atlanta or something.
Yeah, I think they do bring this up, but because the next section though is vampires.
Oh, this is gonna be
Um,
fucking interesting.
Ventrue in the north saw opportunity to weaken the herds and power of their southern cousins. Um,
I'm already not liking the direction this is going.
Vampires did not interfere with the system of slavery because it served as an easy way to consolidate earthly wealth and keep herds under control. Honestly, that's perfect for a vampire.
It is, and also after a lashing, many an enslaved person didn't notice further blood loss.
Oh,
There's a reason why I don't think this
that's
was a good decision to add,
um
because I know what they're going with it, and yes, you can totally do this with vampires, but do you want to get in trouble? Do you want to pull a Chechnya? Do you want to pull a Bope? Bope? Do you want to do
I
that?
mean the thing is, at least in this case, the vamp like it's not like saying, "Oh no, they're teaching people a lesson." No, you're a fucking parasite that feeds off of misery and suffering.
Hey
Um
guys, I need to buy another cover. The last one got lynched. Not Nito. Oh.
uh, oh
Oh.
god. Oh, I realized what oh no. Oh, okay, moving on. Um so apparently again, the American Metal Association's brought up, which
What is
uh
this? What is this idiot's obsession with them?
I guess it's because it's a new institution that's being able to now track bloodborne and other diseases. So the kindred have less to hide. Oh, among these hunters was a lawyer from Springfield, regarded by some of the kindred as their greatest threat in the New World.
Oh
He had a, s-
no, they're doing the
surpri-
vampire assassination. If you're wondering, this is where Task Force Valkyrie came from.
he had a surprising resistance to the effects of domination, and even an attempt to drive him to suicide through depression proved useless.
This is, if you're wondering, yes, in canon, vampires killed Lincoln in the Chronicles of Darkness. This is where the Task Force Valkyrie came from. I'm not
That's why
fucking
they
with you.
that's why they burned Booth with fire. It's light. Wait, that means Booth was a ghoul or a vampire?
Likely a ghoul.
Yeah. Um. Oh, they bring up New Orleans, so here we go. Interview with a vampire. Uh, because of the trade of slave markets. Sherman's name was anathema to the kindred due to his use of fire. Many believed he was one of Lincoln's agents against the vampires in Georgia. Uh,
This might be
he
one of the
unearthed.
more what the
Yeah,
fuck things you can do, but also I'm okay with this section.
yeah, because he burned so many centuries-old mansion, unearthing kindred hiding places.
I
Um,
don't dislike this section. I think the opening was a bit stupid, but it does set up the because this is something that Dark Eras didn't set up. This was something that was explicitly mentioned actually in Hunter the Vigil.
oh, here they bring up the Task Force Valkyrie. After lending his support for the radical Republicans to increase legal protection for blacks, a Washington, D.C. codier of the Lancia Sanctum elders murdered Lincoln in Georgetown.
That's oh, I love how it's Lancia Exactum. That's
Also,
funny.
wait a minute. Isn't Ford's Theater isn't in Georgetown?
It isn't. They planted. That means that Lincoln died elsewhere, and they planted his corpse in Ford Theater after, I guess, shooting it. And that means Booth was blamed. That means
Booth
that they
was
might have made
framed.
him the fall guy.
Uh, Lincoln's team of hunters kept their training and tactics alive for years to come, their descendants forming Task Force Valkyrie.
Yep,
Um, oh no. Though this would take nearly a century, Lincoln's team unwillingly to reveal the existence of the kindred to the general public, they framed his death 2 weeks later.
yep.
Oh,
I
come
forgot
on.
they did that.
Oh.
It would have just been simpler just to have Lancia Ex Sanctum sent their most influential and powerful ghoul after them, a man named John Wilkes Booth. Just have him be a ghoul. That's all you
Or
needed to
don't even,
do.
yeah, don't even name him. Just
Or alternatively, what you could do, and this would be really stupid, but you could, another person shoots them, like another ghoul, and John Wilkes Booth was to blame either due to circumstance or maybe as a horrible shitpost, he was a Task Force Valkyrie member and willingly took the fall.
mm.
You could do some really stupid shit with this.
And so eh, they bring up their connection with the beasts, which
So yeah, they
blah
get
blah
along
blah.
best with tyrants, which are giants, if you're wondering, or if I
Yeah,
recall correctly, and predators, which I don't remember. I think they're the sky ones.
yeah. Sin Eaters. Loved this obviously because a lot of death.
Honestly, a Sin Eater setting during the Civil War is a pretty good one.
Um, the price to bring ghosts to rest proved too high for some Sin Eaters. Confederate soldiers who particularly fought to preserve slavery would not allow themselves to be laid to rest when droves of freed, formerly enslaved people were given 40 acres and a mule, regardless of how quickly the order was rescinded. Union soldiers who particularly fought to spread freedom to all did not accept Sin Eater help as violent attacks on people of color increased and escalated in post-bellum United States.
I think this is kind of a botch job. This is one of the dumber things you could do.
Um,
Like with Sin Eaters, this is one of the dumber things you could have done with them.
Beast in this period saw Sin Eaters as more liberal. While the Beast saw the social impetus on part of the Sin Eaters as an opportunity to teach lessons to society they were a part of, others saw if they became caught up in the same social backgrounds, they would draw too much attention from heroes.
So they were used
Like
as patsies for their lessons.
the Sin Eaters, I guess, stayed out of politics.
Hey, here we go,
Um,
Changelings.
there we go. Um, Many changelings residing in former Confederates were taken before or during the war. Um,
Oh, this is interesting. Since many of them have only recently escaped their durance, they're in a world that's as alien because they were taken before the war. They missed the entire Civil War. That's actually a good idea. And the
it,
Lost are setting up freeholds which mimic the antebellum. This is interesting.
yeah. Freeholds across the South fracture. Some institutes policies of racial inclusivity, others racism. Others insist on, segregated courts, even placing restrictions on black changelings accessing goblin markets. You're made out of paper, tears, or some alien substance. How are you black? Isn't it your fucking form? Or was it the main?
Yeah, because you change quite a bit during your durance because you're not really made of reality anymore.
You know that
They had a
actually
good
that
idea and then they kind of fucked it
yeah
up.
that would be funny. It's like I don't know if like as a shitpost you're sent to a court that is racist, and it's like how do you they think you're black for
I'm now
some
you're saying that I'm now envisioning a court that's dressed as the KKK, but they're not actually committing any crimes. They just think they look cool
I
because they
think
don't
they look
understand.
neat.
They don't understand what they do, and you have to try to teach them what the fuck they were doing, so that they stop wearing the dress.
Oh, I get it. We're Catholics now.
And then that could be a really stupid, fucked up scenario.
So it's okay if we burn the crosses.
I'm just now envisioning this changeling court going to war with Lancia Act Sanctum.
Actually, oh no, I realize this. So it's a changeling court of people taken from like prehistory, something like that. And they're somehow
Oh no
taken
no,
into
they can't be
no,
prehistory.
well, whatever it is, like they're taken from a time period that they don't know what the United States is. They come
The problem
into
is by the 1860s that basically once you get about 100 years, you're not coming back really.
what I'm getting at is basically this. I want a bunch of people, bunch of changelings, seeing Birth of a Nation, and just starting to wear the uniforms, the KKK outfits, not understanding any of its implications.
Oh, I think I figured it out. Okay, so I think I figured when you meet the court and you see them dressed like that, you're going, "What the fuck?" And then you ask them, who's the president? And they simply say, "Oh, it's Madison." And then you
Oh,
hear a few go, "No, no, it's Adams. No, not John Adams, John Quincy Adams. No, 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 I'm pretty sure it's Madison. No, it's Monroe." Like they're all from around that 1810s to 1820s period. They have
so
no fucking clue.
wait, we admitted more states in the Union?
Wait, when we had more? Wait,
They
oh,
burned the White House?
why the hell did they get rid of northern Massachusetts? Why'd they make it Maine?
There's a West Virginia? Where's the East Virginia?
Why the heck did wait? We kicked Mexico's ass in a war?
Mexico became a monarchy by a Frenchman?
Huh?
Paraguay likes who?
Well, I know who I'm gonna vote for. I'm gonna vote for the Whig Party. Wait, they're defunct now?
I was told we could buy a cross of gold.
So
And
so that's so that's where we're
what's
sending.
this
Wait,
wait,
so we emancipated the
we
slaves and sent them west for the 40 acres? That's not a bad idea. That gets rid of some. That's better than sending them to Liberia because they don't know about they don't know about the change. They think they changed it so that they're sent west.
listen, we'll help you, but we need you to acquire this rare creature we've just heard about, the bull moose.
Hey, do you
It
think
gives
you
that
can
little
find? Do you think you can find a platypus? Apparently, that it's not. It's a real creature.
all right, but at sometime let's see with the law. Sometimes rules change with the seasons. Spring King with radical Republican sympathies overturns a conservative White Queen, only for the rules to be changed again with the ascension of a Yankee-born Summer King. And now to tie things up, they don't even have a separate section for describing Sin Eater or Lost and the Beast.
They couldn't be
They just
bothered, which is funny
yeah.
because the
I
Lost
guess they ran
traditionally
out. Yeah,
they ran out of page space because they wasted it too much on complaining about the problems of women in the setting rather than the problems of being a former slave in the fucking setting.
yeah.
I'm
Then the last
sorry,
one,
that's just like what the fuck, man.
the last one though they give is the Forsaken.
Werewolves.
Um, a few outsider packs realized there was an opportunity to carve out better territories. Um, Several packs of the Pure have seized to bring a new war to the south. Um,
I'm just now envisioning like a pure tribe just dressed in fucking clan robes. This is awful.
or you know what? They meet then another clan group, and then they just turn into their wolf form and just rip them apart.
That could be fun.
I don't think they would care. Um, and then we get into the new nightmares that you can do. Uh, so you can do Soldier's Heart. The beast dredges up the worst, most traumatic memory her target has and forces him to relive it. A veteran experiences a flashback to Gettysburg. A free woman
Gettysburg
remembers
wasn't
a
as bloody as Petersburg or quite a
yeah,
few of the battles in 64 and
yeah,
65. Bad
a
choice.
free yeah, a free woman remembering a failed escape attempt. A nurse can't forget the endless rows of the dead and the dying.
I mean,
A
I would
victim
have thought like if you know want to know the example of horror I would give for this one? Imagine a former prisoner listening to the cries of the dying in an overcrowded southern prison. Or
yeah,
maybe there was also a horrifying boat accident, there like a sinking of a ferry ship that went on fire. Basically, during Reconstruction, a lot of prisoners were exchanged, and several of these ferries were overcrowded. One of them suffered a boiler explosion and killed most of the people on board.
oh.
Imagine recreating that moment.
But I like you get to give these nightmares onto people.
Hey, let's make
We're
them.
heroes, there was one. This isn't my skin. the victim perceives herself as being of a different race or gender. Her loved ones see her as she's always been, but she cannot read their sincerity. Instead, she only experiences revulsion and rejection as her social ties crumble and she loses all sense of identity and
I
belonging.
they did the Superman turning Lois Lane black as a power.
I was thinking more like a quantum leap thing.
I was going with the
No,
time
actually, no, it
Superman
would
made
be.
Lois Lane
It would
black.
be more of a quantum leap thing
Yeah.
because everyone else perceives the person as they are, but um, I forget the name of the guy who was doing the quantum leap, but that guy sees himself as himself.
This would be like messing with Uncle Ruckus by actually making him think he's white.
No, no, you do it worse. I'm Asian.
No, I woke up as Chinese. How did this happen?
Guess I gotta start running a laundromat now.
Gotta start running that damn laundromat and learning how to do my math better.
Next one is don't take my leg, doc. Survive recreating, or no, not recreating, forcing someone to believe that they're an amputee. Phantom limb syndrome.
I mean, I like horrible powers like this, but remember that
As
there's
a, to to do against your enemies, not to a as they describe her, the victim.
yeah.
It's like you're inflicting horrors on these people. And speaking of the people that are, I guess, putting that would be responding to these horrors, the heroes of the South,
Oh boy.
Sergeant Clarinda Johnny Weaver, uh, woman on a tobacco farm whose family owned 5 to 8 black servants over the course of her childhood, could never understand the fuss some made over slavery. Her family, after all, treated the slaves quite well. They got Sundays off, extra rations at Christmas time, and children weren't sold until they were at least 8 years old. Half her siblings enlist during the war. One never comes back. One comes without his left arm. Union soldiers raided her farm and watches the family's wealth go up in flames. Once word reached the remaining weavers that her last brother had been killed in the fighting, she had enough. Cut her hair, bound her breasts, enlisted in the Confederate Army, and tried to get revenge, and she hasn't stopped fighting since.
Okay.
Uh, Ollie,
This is based on because this happened quite often during the 19th century where women would do this. It's not unreasonable,
I've
but
never seen it though mixed with essentially a Japanese veteran on an island shooting at people believing that the war's still going on 30 years later.
what would have made a lot more sense is if you had her as an outlaw, like in the territory, in the territories, basically preying on caravans or something.
Yeah,
Similar to how Jesse James, because Jesse James was a former Confederate officer
yeah.
or a Confederate soldier. I wouldn't make her like a rebel without a cause. I'd make her legitimately an outlaw.
Now let's see.
Give
Next
him
is
like an interesting, because it's like the
yeah.
1870s. It's not unreasonable.
No, what do you mean? This is still 1863 to 1865. Next up is Ollie Doherty, Irish, so anti-Irish sentiment. Sought west to seek his fortune. He was willing to work for anyone who would hire him. Always felt a higher calling. His experience of the primordial dream is quite different from most heroes. He believes his connection to this realm is a sacred gift. Feels guided to get rid of the world of wickedness. He's horrified
I
of
I actually kind of
yeah,
like this concept a lot
yeah.
more than the previous one.
He is horrified by the prejudices he sees, and he uh, empathizes with the anti-black bigotry because it reminds him of his own childhood
Well,
and of the persecution
also,
he experienced.
if you're wondering, this actually there's a reason why the Republican Party in the South adopted it's called a black and tan policy. It not in the Irish sense, in the basically black. We freed the slaves, so let's integrate them into our party politic.
Hmm.
That guarantees at least a bulwark. That changed though during the 1900s
Yeah.
when
Uh,
because there was another faction known as the Lily Whites that eventually would win that power struggle.
see, he's trying to overcome his struggle that he's seen as nothing more than a carpetbagger. Can't they see he's just trying to help?
So the concept is interesting where they made him sympathetic and like trying to do good. Johnny Weaver would work better, I think, if they were established as an outlaw. If she slash he and his guys was established as like an outlaw somewhere in Kansas or Minnesota or actually the border states, like the border states in the aftermath of the war. And like historically, eventually, maybe she gets killed in a shootout in '79 or something in Wyoming. Good concept, just needs a little more work. Doherty's pretty fine.
Yeah.
Like a delusional dude who gets dreams, like basically kind of like an early like similar to similar to Joseph, the one he of dreams, or Daniel, only a little
Yeah.
more active.
Yeah. And so the next one is Brendan McKee.
Baron McKee.
Uh, his life is one of almost. His father was almost wealthy enough to be a planter. He was almost good enough to marry Miss Ada Sinclair. He was almost good enough to get a lawsuit, and he was almost good enough to receive an officer's commission. Instead, he worked in the quartermaster.
That's actually one of the That's one of the better gigs you could have in an army,
Yeah.
by the way.
So his ambition led him his true calling as a hero. He's put down two beasts. Hunting beasts give him a sense of fulfillment, and he isn't mindful of the collateral damage, though.
You think he would as a former quartermaster, but they're kind of trying to establish this dude as a fuck up.
He's hunting anyone who he deems responsible for the degradation of the South.
Okay.
And then the next things
This guy's
the
kind of lame, not gonna lie.
yeah
I like the
you got
other two more. The best of them was the priest.
you've got the apexes. So these are these just other supernatural
Okay,
creatures?
so what happened is in Beast the Primordial, I explained this. These are essentially the things that beasts try to teach lessons for because otherwise these things show up. They're even
Yeah.
worse. Apexes are like some of the worst shit you can run into. Oh no,
So you've
no,
got
no, no, never mind. I think these are the ones that happen. This is what happens actually if a beast transcends the physical flesh, like their monster comes out,
hmm.
or they become the monster.
So you've got Old Man River, whose concept is survival on the Mississippi is hard work. He appreciates those who respect his river and navigate the skill to navigate it, but he absolutely cannot abide laziness. So he feeds on the idle and the indolent. Then
Old
you
Man
have
River's an okay concept, but like they don't really explain what his evil form is. Like Makara, if you're wondering, is the ocean-dwelling beasts. Like they're the ones that
yeah.
represent the deep waters. My guess is he's an alligator or like a giant crocodile. I kind of hope he's a giant fuck off alligator gar though. Have you ever seen an
um
alligator gar?
no.
They're like 10 feet. Back in the day, they used to get like up to 10 feet long. Their teeth were razor sharp, and their scales are hard enough to be used by Native Americans as arrowheads.
Hmm.
Legitimately, if say in the Old Testament the Israelites ran into one of those things, like if they existed in the rivers or like off the coast, they'd probably call that the Leviathan. Let's be frank, it's a big fuck off fish with big teeth. The Martine Dragon of Winchester. No, no, Snell. Okay, so we're going here. When
It's
interacting with
androgynous.
mortals.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is also a member of the Ordo Dracul
Oh, I already have completely lost interest in this fucking character.
and has begun used to have a occult library. It was lost
Uh
and
huh.
is, I guess, collecting stuff.
Uh huh.
I don't get what the fear is.
This
And
character
then
sucks.
Neva Rogers, an Anakim of mixed race descent who rules the supernatural community of Galveston, Texas.
Now that's fun.
Even the Vampire Prince and the Freehold Monarch do not act before consulting Mrs. Rogers.
And I've already lost
Everyone
interest.
loves her.
Already lost interest in the fucking character.
Yeah,
Originally
I thought.
occupied by the Union, Confederacy controlled Galveston from 1863 up to the end of the war.
Actually, no. There is something interesting here. So she's trying to make the community better, but the problem is that fewer people living in Galveston whose punishment will satisfy her horror. So she's faced with either finding some way to keep racial tensions at a certain level or risk losing her status as Apex. And again, this is one of the problems. I
Oops.
would not want to play a game where I'm like, yay, I get to live another day. I've caused a race riot.
I'm just now envisioning. I'm envisioning, like, let's say you get dragged into a game of Beast Primordial because you wanted to give a try as a one shot, and then they say, "So, how are you going?" And then the storyteller, with their pig-like eyes and sweaty goblin complexion, just looks at you and goes, "Okay, so how do you promote racial tensions in the ghetto?" What? No, no,
What?
not that type of ghetto. The old classic one. Where you see, we're in Rome. We're in Rome, and the Pope recently made it so that all Jews of Rome have to wear funny hats.
So just big hats?
I'm not even kidding. There was a Pope that wanted the Jews to wear funny hats to point out that they were Jewish.
Couldn't he have just look at like the Polish ones? He could have given us the Pope hat. I wouldn't mind wearing big Pope-like hats.
I think they were supposed to wear like some big bright yellow hat or something. Just something. It was something ridiculous like
I mean,
that.
it's ridiculous, but hey, it still allows you to wear something covering the head.
Look, we need you to cause tensions among the ghettos between the Jewish people and the dock workers. Why? Because that's how you feed. Jesus fucking Christ.
Oh, it's listen.
By the way, the
Give
best
a
part
supply
about this
of
character,
bacon.
the best part of this character is this is legitimately a fake activist. This is the example of a fake activist. Ugh.
She literally profited off of racism.
Yup. Hmm. Oh no. This character's too real. Anyway.
Yeah. Location of interest, hotel, plantation. Here. Okay, finally. Here we go. Playing the game. Fears of the South. Beast-centric chronicle set in Reconstruction. Choose one or two core fears of the story to revolve around. One is empty fields, empty larder, which is, I guess, starvation, disease.
Aftermath of the
Um,
burning of the South,
yeah,
Sherman's March.
and then just position. There's the town's mayor who's rich enough to import food, and um, you know,
Oh, these are the
it
plot hooks they're giving? This is the best they can fucking do?
which is teach this mayor that he needs to give food to these people,
What is this
and
trash?
then make sure that these people inspire fear in these people so that they eat right.
Yeah, eat right. With what? With what? Are you going to tell them how to eat pine trees? Here's how you eat pine cones, which, by the way, you can do as long as they're immature.
Hmm.
Here's how you eat
Uh,
pine bark, and here's how you make coffee out of acorns, like how the Germans did during the war.
oh, next one. Next one's about PTSD.
Yeah, because when I think of Beast Chronicles, I think of traumatizing veterans as they lie dying in a medical tent.
In this setting, fear comes through those who want to help but simply can't. The preacher finds the comfort of Christian love only goes so far. The alienist finds his schooling inadequate when treating a patient's flashbacks. The druggist can provide solutions, but only temporary. How dare you rely on medicine or faith?
No, no,
Don't you
you
know
you
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 need
need to
more?
stay broken in the brain. You need to not fix your brain chemistry or try to break brain habits. You need to be a broken wreck so I could traumatize you until you either end it or you fucking, I don't know, collapse and I gotta find a new victim.
Um, there is
Please
talk
allow me
about
to feast off of your horror as watching your entire unit get killed by Gatling guns.
mm, let's see, fears of loss, fears of the wild. So they do actually recommend perhaps utilizing the folklore of the South.
Well, yeah, there's some really fucked up folklore from the region.
Then finally, they say role-playing race.
I mean, I'm surprised they didn't do. Do you want to know what I think of when if I had to do like a Reconstruction era setting in a game like this? You know what I would have probably brought up? Those that walk the night. You know, like the guys in the ghost outfits that ride on horses that leave bodies behind. Or the guy screaming at your face wearing the red shirt with the cudgel that prevents you from being able to even use your given by the government right and by God the ability to vote for someone that can advocate for you. Or maybe
you know
the
that
greasy fucker who basically makes it so that your entire farm stand is taken up by this guy who just so happens to be from Ohio, who wants to get a new lease on life by buying out your old farm that your mom and pa worked so hard to raise.
you know what would make I think would be werewolf and demon
That would actually be dope. Like, imagine being a bunch of backwoods werewolves trying to basically get revenge on those who took your farms, like the carpetbaggers. That could be
on
really
the
fun.
carpetbaggers or on
And the
the
pure. The pure are also a big threat, like
yeah,
because they're like doing something during this time.
and they get the pleasure of murdering the clan as they mess with the local wildlife.
That could be really fun.
And then within the cities
Also,
as
you
well.
also you can hunt bandits because this is when banditry, like a lot of outlaws, got their start in the aftermath of the Civil War because since they were too high up in the ranks to actually ever join the army again, or because that's all they knew how to do.
So I do like when they're talking about role-playing race that um to try to understand character motivation beyond he's a racist who does racist things because he's a racist. You need a level of complexity and nuance. That's essentially why does he think the way he thinks? I think goes a hell of a lot more than honestly a lot of stories do today.
What now?
So they're talking about when role playing race is that you need to have some complexity when you're
You
talking
do.
about character motivations
Like when
regarding
I
race.
was doing all those, like legitimately, if you're going to do the Reconstruction era, it, it also works for Slaughterhouse of Europe as well. Just like if you're dealing with something that is due to a cause of division in, say, religion, something as simple as religion or ethnicity, that's a big one. Race, like your skin tone, you have to play it correctly. You have to you can't just generalize because yeah you could totally have it so that like the South are complete absolute fucking bigots, but there were thousands of people that legitimately fought to get them their rights because they saw that they were treated just as shittily in some ways as the slaves were because they were on the bottom compared to those assholes at the top that had all the land and prestige. Not all carpetbaggers, for example, from the north, exploited the people down south. Some of them genuinely tried to, say, rebuild, especially like in, say, Atlanta, where they would try to rebuild it. You have to
It,
play this with nuance. Not every, like I gave examples of Confederate soldiers that that turned into outlaws. There are quite a few Union ones that did the same thing because after the fighting, that's all they knew how to do because that's legitimately what they picked up as a kid, like as a teenager. Or alternatively, they came back and they just didn't have the opportunities. Not all Irishmen were unwilling to fight. Quite a few were totally fine with doing it. Quite a few were completely opposed to going into a war to die for some rich man, too, by extent. When I mentioned the Cherokee, quite a few Native American tribes also sided with the Union. In fact, in the furthest west, I believe that's actually how the South lost, alongside with some Union raiders.
yeah. Also, though, brings up an interesting point of vampire and changeling as well. I mean, I think just at the end of the day, we realize this: Beast just does not work.
Beast is a great character. Beast should
He's
never
a
have
great
been a
villain.
splat. Beast should have been like a night horror book. Like if they did the Primordial Fears and you made like beasts as these interesting one-off monsters, or you treated them like slashers where they had a book but they were not a main splat.
And if you want to give them sympathy in the fact that they're essentially these cursed humans that
Um,
are
I
forced.
I actually came up with the idea that beasts are what happen when horrible events happen to an area, like the results of say a riot. beasts might form from that. They're kind of like Prometheans in that they're created by the collective emotions of the people in that area at the time.
Perhaps trying to
So,
to make sense out of the chaos.
like, let's say you have a dragon character. That would be due to massive wealth inequality. Like during the gold rush, you might find a couple dragons popping up, legitimately just because of that craving for what they don't have, and the getting fucked over by people selling them shovels. Giants form when you feel powerless. Like say during the I'm going to use it during the Soviet Union when you were terrified for your life or feeling like you have no power to, have any decision. A giant might form. Conversely, that's how boogeymen form, out of fear, just like the deep, dark fear of what can happen, what goes bump in the night. And they are not human, but they can guise as humans. And their main objective is to try to figure a way out of the cosmological story and resolve the emotions that formed them, to become more real, so to speak, to become a creature, a living legacy rather than just a fear in the minds of people.
Hmm.
That would have been my take on these things. But we didn't get that. What happened was they were first originally created to be like otherkin, and then when people made fun of that during the initial Kickstarter, they then retconned it poorly because the writer who was part of it, the main writer, the abuser, didn't really like that he had to change a lot. So they just made them humans who willingly gave up their souls to be eaten by monsters in the dreamlands. That's the other thing. You willingly have to give up your soul for this. You're just straight up like a fucking soulless monster. Like in a way, I would actually have Prometheans oppose them by principle. Like current beast, the Primordial Prometheans, I would have them loathe them because they gave up their humanity. They gave up their soul. It's not like a vampire where it's a tragedy. Usually, you are taken and you don't understand why. It's not like a changeling where the same thing applies. You are taken by things beyond your grasp. You willingly gave up your fucking spirit. The luminous light that you call a soul was squashed by a primordial evil that you willingly gave to it for power. But that's just me rant because for some fucking reason in the original Beast book, the only group of people that didn't like beasts were demons. And that's just because for some reason beasts have no effect on them and vice versa.
Hmm.
Race and mechanics. While creating custom mechanics to represent structural inequality may be tempting, the interplay of race, class, and gender in Reconstruction South was more complicated than can be accurately represented. A player who creates the character of a black woman living in Richmond, Virginia with 5 dots of resources may seem unrealistic at first glance, but also might describe the historical figure of Maggie Walker, the first black woman to charter a bank in the US.
And
Yeah, but
that
that was an exception, not the fucking rule.
I would argue this in favor. You are playing as characters in an RPG.
Yeah,
They tend to
you
be
just
more
have to come
larger
up
than
with
life.
reasons why though. And sometimes because of the tensions, that would have to be a part of the storyline, I think.
Yeah. They talk about the eventually more technological progress comes about. They give some chronicle seeds, give some optional story hooks in
Oh
terms
boy.
of Alaska, uh, the Louisiana Ice Company,
What the fuck?
I Nebraska.
I don't blame them for not wanting to make a racist condition or tilt not NATO. It's just like that's the fucking setting. That's kind of the big if you're doing
I think
Reconstruction.
what they were saying is that, well, as they're trying to say is that the mechanics of it all a little bit more complex than simple
I
modifiers
mean
of
it is.
resources. You could boil it down to, I guess they don't want to either do that or they want to gamify race or gamify racism.
That's true. That is true, and they actually do comment, as the last paragraph says, focus on describing it using narrative elements, which is better. Like, if you're gonna do a black person with like 5 resources, you're gonna have to deal with very angry, poor whites that think that you're cheating the system or something. Or let's say, because there were black people elected into local office, that could be a really fun storyline where you have to actually fight through a variety of systems just to get on the ballot, and then fight the leg
or
breakers.
yeah, or contextualize resources as something different.
Yeah, like a
Uh,
guy. I mean, technically it's
yeah,
what you got on assets, but
if you don't have many physical assets, you might have,
no,
I
I mean,
guess,
resources is
communal.
legitimately your wealth, like disposable money,
Yeah,
essentially. So it kind of is your money.
I guess if you want to contextualize, I mean, like, because if we're doing it like, the Ooga Booga mage set in, the prehistoric times, they don't have money.
No, they do have resources that, like, in terms of like assets.
Oh, in that case, yeah.
Like, resource also indicates like assets that you can just kind of use for trade or barter. In Grug Mage, if you have 5 resources, that just means you're like a really wealthy herdsman.
Oh, okay.
Like, you have a lot of cattle that you can sell for money, for food, or for leather, or for knife.
Uh, Looks like much of the other settings or the other sort of story hooks deal with the clan. Pennsylvania, Virginia.
Elections for sales. What's this one about?
These are just optional like seeds. This is the election for sale. It's two different beasts having to run for local sheriff.
Some of these are kind of almost interesting. I do like the hunting party where you have a vampire just falling apart into a psychotic fit. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah,
Alaska is just why? What?
they're just
Why?
giving other, I guess, other story hooks.
Such a
S-
shit choice.
Um, well, they did purchase it in the late 1860s.
They did, but like the stuff they're gonna complain about is later than the purchase.
Yeah.
Also, on top of that, this is more of a Canadian history sort of thing. Like they're kind of ignoring that.
Well, as soon as it becomes part of the U.S., it's no longer Canadian history.
Well, no, it was Russian history, but like specifically the things they're talking about, like the awful teaching conditions to the native Inuit and the native islanders and whatever of Alaska. That's more of like of what happened in Canada. Which, hey, yeah,
Mm.
it did happen in Alaska, but it's just like, really, guy, really?
Again, Louisiana.
That's a good
Apparently,
one.
an ice company is holding a beast below plains aquifers to siphon plains freshwater and turn it into ice.
That's an interesting idea.
Um,
I mean, that's kind of an interesting idea. I mean, that's more deviant the
I
renegade
think
plot.
I think they hinted. Was it Chiron? Because they say perhaps the company shares roots with a European pharmaceutical company that blooms at the turn of the century.
That's kind of lame.
Nebraska, they're talking about railroad construction and protests or working conditions.
Yeah, railroad working conditions are atrocious.
Pennsylvania,
Brood, I think, is a term for beasts.
yeah, I guess a brood is being targeted by the Klan. South Carolina,
I
um,
think the problem I have with the Pennsylvania one having clans is like I
not
don't
this
think that
time.
I don't think the clan was that relevant out of the South in this era. I think they might have had chapters in the North, but they were not very common.
Yeah. Um,
Now, if this was the second iteration, yeah, I'd believe it because holy shit, there
yeah.
there was like 2 million clans members at one point. It
Um,
was nuts.
South Carolina is about, I guess, the legacy of Confederate money. Virginia. This
The Confederate money one is just kind of
yeah,
dumb.
Virginia. White men feared the loss of sexual control over black men, black women, and white women. So this is, I guess,
What the
the issue
fuck?
of sexual relations,
What the fuck?
anti-miscegenation laws. So this is about what would become Loving v. Virginia. If a group of two, the player characters may take on the roles of these two beasts trying to move up to Massachusetts to marry.
I
Yeah, that's why I want my chronicle about torturing people to teach them a lesson. Marriage. Well, I guess that's one way to torture people. Uh-huh.
I I fucking hate every single story hook they've suggested.
This is just
Dog shit, absolute dog shit that has nothing to do with the setting really.
and
Dog shit,
we got our
maybe
inspirations.
sort of interesting. Dog shit, boring, absolute boring fucking dog shit. America's never loved Reconstruction. For over a century, artistic focus on American life during the latter half of the 19th century revolved around the Western, avoiding North and South alike in favor of more hopeful narratives. The few,
That is true.
it is true, but like, this is coming from a really stupid way of framing it.
Yeah.
The few films and novels that do handle Reconstruction often do so from a lost cause point of view, minimizing the immorality of slavery, emphasizing Northern corruption, and justifying Confederate succession. This is also true. Such works still have value, however, especially to a storyteller looking for insight into the lost cause mindset. Whether filmmakers and authors realize it or not, post war themes frequently show up in westerns. Jesse J. Hey, they actually pointed out that he was a guerrilla. Good jobs. You pointed out Jesse
Yeah.
James like way later than I did, but you still did. That's. Did you know he actually once tried to I think rob Minnesota and they basically almost killed him right then and there? I think it was Minnesota. He like tried to rob a bank there and they just legitimately started fucking blasting. He almost got shot in the head.
Let's see. Literature, you've got Beloved by Toni Morrison, Life on the Mississippi by Mark Twain. Um, Films, you've got Gone with the Wind. You've got Frank and Jesse.
Yeah, Cold
Oh,
Mountain sounds about right.
yeah.
Gone
Music,
with the Wind's a good pick.
and then television. You've got Children of Dust, Firefly.
No, the fact that they picked Firefly makes this an instant failure, in my opinion.
Apparently, it was an allegory for the post-Civil War United States.
I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit.
Um,
That is reaching, and fuck you.
Hell on Wheels. Two lead characters is an ex-Confederate slave-owning soldier and a freedman who eventually become friends.
That's at least relevant.
That actually sounds interesting.
It actually, from what I understand, also Roots is like, of course you're going to use Roots
Yeah.
because they have an entire episode on Reconstruction because the entire thing was basically like this was a big special in the 1970s for those of you who've never seen it, and it was about the history of this man's lineage, starting from getting his people dragged from Africa by Portuguese merchants and then basically going through the system of slavery up until the freedom and then the struggles of gaining equal rights. It is about the problems that his family faced over the series of decades and centuries. It's a really good series. I do seriously recommend watching it just because it does give you a very good idea on what what the system was like. It's one of the best picks that they have. Cold Mountain's also a really good one, as well as Gone with the Wind. I I really fucking hate the Firefly one. That's awful. Also, you can kind of tell. I really don't think that this person was particularly interested in the setting. It was more just like a political cudgel in a way, sort of.
Perhaps.
It
Again,
felt more like
overall,
a cudgel.
it's much like Beast. It's clearly this mess that has horrible implications.
So the problem I have with this is you picked a setting not many people really would cover. I genuinely do have to applaud that just because this is something that I do think gets neglected. The Reconstruction period always tends to get neglected in favor of Westerns. That is true. But goddamn, you fucked up presenting this. You complained more about the rights of women than you did the conditions of former slaves. What the fuck? That's something I really can't forgive, by the way. That
You
is
all
what the fuck.
also discussing too much about the causes or stuff that actually didn't play that much a part going from where are we, what came before and where are we now?
Do you want to know? Like they gave an example of a black woman getting her first charter for a bank. They didn't talk about Farmers Bank, which was a very common way that black people would try to avoid getting their shit ruined by white people. Because what they would do is they'd start, local agricultural banks that would allow them to essentially reliably hold their own money. And there were rules to try to control finances. They didn't cover any of that. They didn't cover the efforts that the Black Methodist Church, the African American Methodist Church, put into literacy campaigns to fight against the literacy laws, up to and including making sure they're able to actually even get past the bullshit ones. Because yeah, the literacy laws, like you mentioned, the ones for black people were like at a much higher level. Like you had to read it at least as like a middle school or high schooler level, while the one for just whites was legitimately like, can you sign your name? Can you sign your name and read like this really simple sentence? Like, are you capable of at least reading on like a first to third grade level? Like, which is something they could have covered. They could have covered that. They could have covered what the carpetbaggers did. They could have covered the Reconstruction efforts in rebuilding cities that were destroyed by the war because the South was indiscriminately hit the hardest. Yes, the North got some raids, particularly in Pennsylvania and in Maryland, but for the most part, it was Southern damage that had to be fixed. They didn't talk about the conditions of former veterans. They didn't talk about the veteran exchange programs that happened because the goddamn the prisons were outnumbered. They didn't talk about all the you could go into an entire section on Grant's corruption or what the carpetbaggers did. You could have talked about the efforts that were taken to try to make sure that black people could represent themselves. This is the era where black men were actually elected as senators, and well, not senators for states, but state senators and representatives. I think they even made it into the House at this point.
I think, yeah, at least one made it.
I'm just
There's
seriously,
so
you had
in
so many things that
the
that's
focus appears
neglected.
to be, yeah, because the focus appears to be on social and gender politics. I mean, that's the first thing they bring up is within social forces.
How does
And
in a setting where it's ethnicity that's the problem? How does this concern women? What the fuck, man? One of your sources is literally Firefly, which I think is unpardonable.
well, not sort inspirations,
I
to be
don't care.
clear. I don't think they were taking his Firefly and saying this is what happened in the Civil War.
For all you know, they might have. For all you know, they might have.
And so we would have seen a lot more quippy dialogue if that was the case. And then here's the other thing: when they're bringing up though the supernatural, why the fuck you bring up the American Medical Association and the American Bar Association if you haven't introduced those topics at the beginning? You
Be-
want to talk about the changing institutions in America? Put
because
that in the beginning,
my men banned women from the organization.
because wizards.
Wizards are men and women, women. Oh God, I I legitimately have nothing but scorn because you really it is absolutely insulting that you're not actually going to cover the 10 years. You barely even covered what Andrew Johnson did. You didn't you only covered one or two veto votes. You didn't talk about how he killed the 40 acres and the mule reparations. You didn't talk about how sharecropping actually worked. Like you only barely talked about that. You spent more effort crying about how a white woman having sex with a black man resulted in her being seen as getting raped and that guy getting killed. You spent more effort talking about that, which don't get me wrong, that's fucked up. That is definitely on there, and I would have been even angrier if you didn't talk about it. But you're not going to talk about, say, the voter intimidation. You're not going to talk about, because you only barely talk about the Klan. You don't even talk about some of the other organizations, which in some ways were more violent. Which is saying a lot, because holy shit, the Klan.
You know what? With the Klan that they didn't bring up, they brought a little bit about the opposition to the Klan, but I believe one of the purposes of the U.S. military being there is that they often stopped the Klan.
They did. They almost never. I mean, they did. Occasionally, they would look the other way, but
Yeah.
they actually did put some effort in quashing them. They don't even talk about the banditry that was a problem. Because you did have former Confederate guerrillas, and you also had a few Northerners that would just continue, like from militias that would just go into becoming outlaws. You don't even do a goddamn thing about Western settlement, which, if you're going to talk about Reconstruction, you're going to have to at least talk a little bit about. Because do you want to know where, because a lot of war veterans actually were settled west because they did a great service to their country and they were given at least some form of payment in the form of land. You don't even talk about the Buffalo Soldiers, which were the all black regiments, which massively got expanded during this time period. You know, ah, God, I fucking. You know
And
what
again,
I can say this. I like this still more than the Brian Boru one.
the one I can say there is detail and definitely fleshing out of a setting. They needed to do a lot more
They
if
needed
they
to
wanted to really
really
cover this
cover the
era.
South. They really wanted to cover the South. I really would have focused on the Reconstruction period proper, 1863 to 1877. I would have focused solely on that. I would have also given I would have given also several areas. Like I would have probably gone with a place in the deep south, a place in the upper south, and a place in the Midwest.
Yeah, I think we've learned something by reviewing a bunch of these. They tend to do well when they focus on a particular time period and location that distills what they're trying to capture.
I'm now envisioning that Stone Toss comic where it's, like the guy showing like the business plan to the guy where it's like, and this is how, and this is what we're gonna do, and it's like talking nothing about what it's nothing but women, and then you have the CA going, how does that have anything to do with Reconstruction era society and how they treat African Americans? African Americans.
Reconstruction?
They talked more about the slave revolts than they did Reconstruction, which I think is kind of gross.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, it's significant, and if you're going to do backstory, you do have to explain that because that's actually one of the many, like the Nat Turner revolts. That's actually one of the big reasons the South became so hardcore against having any form of liberation for African Americans.
And you know what? They missed out on the other supernatural. We didn't get Demon. Deviant, I don't think was out yet.
Imagine a
We
demon carpetbagger. That could be really
yeah,
fun.
we didn't get um
You didn't get a
uh
Promethean. Imagine as a
Promethean.
Promethean. Imagine as a Promethean. You were formed and wandering a wasteland that you thought was your own creation. Because you are in the aftermath of, say, Petersburg. You were formed by a mourning widow, maybe. Like a widow who wanted her husband back. Or you were created by a grieving son whose mother was killed during the house-to-house fighting in a city. And you are
Oh,
wandering
what
a
if you were like,
wasteland that you think might be of your own fault.
oh no, I got a Frankenstein that's made out of both Confederate and Union members.
And you are not only for Confederate and Union members, you are the product of what happened when an all-black regiment fought against a Confederate army, a unit led by Nathan Bedford Forrest. You were stitched out of both of them, and their spirits are still screaming in your head.
The other one that they missed out on, the Arisen. Now, Mummy may not apply this, but I did think of an idea. what would their reaction to chattel slavery be?
They would have just been along the lines of, why are you getting rid of such a useful equipped tool? Whatever, I don't care.
Well, no, would they view it as like the same thing? Because ancient time slavery was incredibly
Actually,
different
that could
from
be
this.
really funny where they're actually abolitionists specifically because you're not enslaving everyone. That's the problem. You're not enslaving everyone. Enslave the Irish, Chinese, and yourselves. We're going to make this country like Irem.
Well, no, no. Instead of Liberia, it's again they're just sending them back to Arabia to build up their empire.
Or here's a really fun idea: a mummy cult based on like the Great Religious Awakening, like one of the second,
Oh,
like the second Great Awakening or the first Great Awakening. You have a bunch of Pentecostalists who are like chanting with snakes, and then you find out that the saint that they allegedly have, like their founder, their holy man, is a mummy.
oh.
That could be
That-
fun.
Again, so many more opportunities besides Beast because Beast is just awful.
It's bad, but what I think ultimately ruined this book is just they knew this was racially charged, and they, much like Coyote and Crow, they bitched out. They didn't do the ugly truth stuff that they should have. Like they covered it somewhat, but they cared more about the rights of women than they did the rights of African Americans.
Though this does think, what if you did a Dark Era set as suffragettes?
That could be cool. If you
Uh,
do it right, that could be really cool. Like it goes from the 1880s to like the 1920s. And actually,
yeah.
no, up to the 1930s, because you could even cover the flapper phenomenon where they actually shorten their dresses.
Hmm.
And it was a lot more fine, especially because in World War I, women went to factories. Yes, a lot of them went back, but like that actually started labor disputes. Like legitimately, a lot of early socialist labor unions actually did not allow women to work. They were anti-suffrage in the sense that women were allowed to work because they protected labor, which was mostly men.
Yeah.
It's similar to how, in a cursed way, originally the Communist Party of South Africa was pro-white. I'm not even kidding. It's one of the interesting side history notes. But
But
yeah,
that's
overall,
why
I
we
would
enjoy the
say
series.
this is the third worst book that they've made in Dark Eras.
Thankfully, though, we've. I don't think there are ones that are worse than this.
No, I don't think it's the worst book. Do you want to know why? I really hated the Raven and Wolf one.
Because at
I,
least there's
I don't
something you
give
can
a
get out
shit
of this.
about Brian Boru. I don't give a shit that he died in this one fucking battle. What the hell is wrong with you? I think it's worse than To the Strongest, slightly. To the Strongest had nothing going for it, but it at least kind of covered Alexander the Great. It also wasn't Beast, so by dint, it's like barely better. But hey, a Beast book that's only the second worst thing ever made by a human in this entire series. That's something. What are your
Well,
thoughts on this horrible book? I mean, amazing book. I mean, the book that changed the book of all time.
I mean, again, it's shit. Um,
Yeah.
I guess next week, if we can try, we'll see about the player's handbook for D and Done.
Yeah, we might do D&D Done, aka D&D 2024. Literally, the name of the book is Dungeons and Dragons 2024.
Like
It's
it's a
also
fucking
sometimes
reboot
called
movie.
5.24. We might. That's going to be a nitty gritty, and we're going to have the best aid in terms of being able to go through that fucker bit by bit. Alternatively, we could just say fuck it and do the Rifts book. We were originally gonna we originally suggest Imsit originally insisted on a Rifts book. I just didn't feel like doing Rifts today.
It's the one. It's the one where you get to play as dolphins
So yeah,
and
fuck it. Maybe
psychic
next week we'll
whales.
do that. Why not?
We'll figure it out. Good night, everyone.
Night everyone, and remember, Reconstruction was a bad time, but how did it affect women the most?